It is 1 o'clock and this meeting will come to order. Audience please advise. Roll call, our trustees are all here except for audience, please. Trustee Robinson is not able to make it today, and our attorney had an emergency this morning and he will not be able to make there. Well, he wasn't sure what time he was going to be able to make it. And our treasurer is also trying to be late.
I also will have to leave.
Oh, okay. What time?
About 12:45 or 2:45.
That makes more sense. All right. So our legal counsel not being here, we will skip the section for now for the legal counsel, and we will go on to our insurance discussion. The director update us, please.
Yes, so in your table packet, you should have a memo from me that lists insurance update. I'll just start kind of at the top. In terms of ICRIP appeal correspondence, I followed up this morning for an update on our status. And in quotes here, at our last board meeting, there was no motions to change ICRIP's insurance agreement with CLN, and no agenda requests regarding this topic have been made for our next meeting. I would conclude that no changes will be made. And then please thank Chair Addison for taking the time to appeal. And that was the most recent correspondence I received from Tim Osborne, the Executive Director of ICRIP. And then I'll mention, I do have a question or some clarification of the CLN needs. And so I would ask the board for clarification of what is meant by a mid-year insurance policy. Is it the board's intention that the new policy replace both Great American, which we currently have for employment and D&O, and ICRIP for all other library liabilities? Is this mid-year meant to begin April 2024? And then I put an insurance cost estimate. My estimate would be for replacing it in April would be an additional $35,000. And then I just include all of the insurance correspondence that I've had in November. I continue to work on 3 quotes, not knowing what the exact needs of CLN were. I made the assumption that we were looking at mid-year and that we wanted to closely align with the ICRIP policy that we had before. So essentially replacing both. And then I asked the insurance brokers to create as a final product for us gap or similar analysis of comparison of if we have several policy options. And then I gave them a deadline of January 10th. So I mentioned who I've been corresponding with, Jeffrey Winkler and Brian Nate with Redmond Insurance. And I talk about their policy that it's with Bright Specialty Insurance. And then I've submitted the application and then all of the requested documentation, which is listed there. I've been corresponding with Dusty Harris and Kathy Ayers with Marcia McLennan. They are working right now with Philadelphia Insurance. I completed a 4-page public library supplemental application and provided the additional documentation that they were asking for relating to our facilities and sprinklers. I did reach out to another company and they said, quote, the coverage that we need is very specific and the insurance market for that coverage is limited. And so they weren't going to be able to obtain a quote from us. And then finally, we've made some preliminary contact with Gallagher Insurance, who is our broker for healthcare, to review both risk management and other liability insurance options that they may be able to quote for us.
Okay, well, I would like, if we find someone who provides full insurance coverage at reasonable rates, I would like to start as soon as feasible. And so you said that you have given Redmond Insurance all of the documentation that they requested? And everything that they need to get things started?
So I'll just restate what I put in here, that I've been working with multiple companies, and to date, I've responded to all of the requests from all of the insurance companies.
Okay, responded in full?
I find that offensive because I just said, and very specifically so for example, I'll bring you back to the quote that I've been corresponding with Jeffrey Winkler, licensed producer, and Brian Nate, operations manager with Redmond and Company Insurance. Most recently, a 14-page application for Wright Specialty Insurance was completed. Additionally, all supporting documentation has been provided, including the 2022 audited financial statement, the employment practices policy with Great American, the library policies, the FEIN number, and the 5-year loss report and inventory with values of facilities and vehicles.
Okay, I'm sorry, I did not mean to be offensive. What I just, that the 14-page application for Wright Specialty Insurance, I wasn't clear when I first read through this that was with Jeffrey Winkler with Redmond. So, but you cleared that up, so thank you.
Sure.
Trustee Claus?
I wanted to ask the library director to clarify. I think on the last meeting, you said that there were 4 or 5 brokers who have asked to quote, wanting to provide quotes, but it doesn't sound like you have more than 2 that you worked with, and you reached out to 2 others. So was there others that wanted to give quotes?
I'm not exactly sure what was said before, but like I said, I would like to get 3 actual quotes. Officially, the denial of doing a quote could be considered essentially like in a bidding process. That would be an appropriate response included in 3. But for the best interest of the library, I think having 3 different companies offer a quote is probably for the best. So I will continue to work with Gallagher. I'm interested in their risk management option as well, since we seem to have increasing risk, and moving away from ICRIMP, they're doing both our risk management and our liability. So replacement for that as well.
So the question I had, was there 4 or 5 companies asking to bid on it? It sounds like it's no, or can you answer that?
I don't recall exactly what was stated. I've had several people reach out to me with recommendations for insurance companies to contact, and I have had some interest, but I've moved forward with who I've said in this document. This is who I've contacted in November.
Okay, and I meant to read this before we got started, but just a reminder to the board members that they must obtain the floor by being recognized by the chair. And members should address the chair so we don't have the heightened tensions or the back and forth conversations that exclude the rest of the board, because I know recently we've had just back and forth, and no one else got a chance to speak. So I think Trustee Blank is next.
So help me with understanding, are we committed now to pay ICRIMP the full year's amount? We are. I know I've asked this before. I'm sorry that I'm doing it again. Are we committed to, we have paid the full amount to Great American at this point in time? So at this point in time, we're $13,000 above budget for insurance.
Somewhere between 8 and 13. So yes, roughly that.
Well, if we have to pay that, if we have to pay ICRIMP for the full year,
Yeah.
then we will write. So at this point in time, we're about $13,000 above. So these coverages that you're talking about would be in addition to what we have, and you're estimating would add another $35,000 to that line. So we're not talking $48,000.
Okay, hold on. We need to obtain the floor, but we had 5 minutes for this section, and we're about 8 minutes over. So
Can I, so we get that answered? Can I just get that question answered?
perhaps you could send out an email.
Well, I do have a question myself. So I just asked for clarification.
Oh, right.
It would be really helpful for me, and I think it's really critical. The board thinks they had consensus, or they directed me as appropriately as they can, and I'm saying to you, I do not understand. Are you wanting it to start in April? Are you wanting it to start now? Like I said, my understanding of a mid-year would be like at 6 months, and I would be concerned if we started it earlier because of rising costs. So I need a specific 3 people on the board saying that they want it. So what I've heard so far is one person say they want to start right away. And then I've had a half a question answered. We don't have enough time and I still don't have directions.
Okay, so do we have consensus do you guys want to start now?
I want it as soon as possible. Be supplemental. If we can't get rid of iCrimp, then I guess it's supplemental.
All right, trustee Blank?
I know.
Okay, trustee Henley?
I'm not 100% understanding. So we have iCrimp coverage for, I believe it is a year in general. We have supplemental coverage for, is that a year or? So if anything, I would like to wait at least for it to be the 6-month mark. I don't know if there's any urgency. We've got insurance. I guess we're above budget on it.
Yeah, the insurance we aren't fully covered. There's a lot of things that we're at risk for. So I would like one as soon as possible, and especially if we could check to see if we could get our other amounts prorated. So
Point of
now
order,
6
point
months.
of order, you cut me off from getting an information, and yet you keep going on.
I'm sorry, I thought you were done speaking.
I was not. I asked you for more time to get my question answered.
Okay, the director has asked, I mean, we're out of time for this section, so trustee Henley, your final answer is now or 6 months or what?
I say 6 months.
Okay, so we do
Talk
not
about
have,
this at the next meeting as an agenda item. I would like to talk about risk management a little bit because if we do replace iCrimp, they're currently providing that service for us.
okay, all right, so our next item of business is discussion on director evaluation policy, and we were supposed to have a presentation on that last time. Do you want to give a presentation first?
I don't have a particular presentation prepared. I was tasked many months ago with working. I was assigned to a committee of myself, advising myself and trustee Plus to come up with a policy for the library director. It's, to my knowledge, there is not. So I'm not sure how the board had all these years went by with no policy on anything to do with the performance evaluations for the library director. So what I do is I ran out of time between working on the material selection policy and the withdrawal policy and so forth, ran out of time to have a joint meeting as a subcommittee. But based upon experience working and doing performance evaluations, I'm not a professional at that, but I've been doing performance evaluations for about 35 years in my past career, 2 or 3, many different jobs. And so what I do is I extracted here and there data, lots of plagiarizing here, of information from the Idaho Commission for Libraries. I actually look at as I said, the EVO ALA, look at what they had. I looked at other library systems and dabbled in what they use for the policy. And so that's where I came up with this policy, which is, I think, a 1.5 or 2 pages long. And then the form that would accompany that is the form, my understanding, I never saw it actually done, that was used to evaluate past library directors at the CLN. So I have that as a separate paper here. And then finally, because that scale that's used on that form, I'm not so sure I like it. I provided 8 different scales we could use, and we can go to 10 or 15, but different suggested scales going from 1 being the highest down to 6. So some of them are very shallow, just as excellent, satisfactory, needs improvement, unknown. Other ones go into much more detail, outstanding performance is exceptional, so forth. So you can see that. So that's kind of what I put together. I'm not so proud I can't take edits. I'm happy to have people chop on this policy I drafted. So I guess that's my presentation.
Thank you. All right, I would like to go through this sequentially. So we would start with the preface. Does everyone go to the preface as it is, or are there changes? Trustee Blank?
So, concerned about where this came from. So I did look up. It doesn't have any sources on this. So I did look this up. Some of this is taken word for word. I think it's the North Dakota State Library. So word for word that it would, as a library, we cite our sources. And so I would like us to at least cite that we are using in our performance evaluation policy, North Dakota's, their introduction to, and then in addition to that, several other sites where it is. I guess what I'm saying is, I think that as a library, plagiarizing is basically unethical, and so unless it's cited, and so I would like us to cite the sources, and it's very helpful to me. I mean, I like that we use in other state libraries. But can we at least get, if we don't want to change it ourselves or do it ourselves, can we at least have some citing of sources used?
Trustee Young.
I'm not accustomed to having a bibliography at the bottom of the policy. And I don't recall going to, I think it was the Dakotas, one of the Dakotas. I think I saw Jersey somewhere up in New England. I think it was Spokane. And another one or two that were cited and put out as examples by the ALA on their website. So I don't even know where I got all of these from. And I'm quite sure no one's going to be offended if we use some wording from somebody else's policy. It's not a book. I don't think it may make money on the policy. I don't think there's any copyright infringement. So I don't even know that I could go back and figure out where I got all these pieces from. I probably could. I see prints of all kinds of stuff, but I don't know that it's necessary.
Yeah, I didn't think that government documents and policies were something that needed to be cited. I actually believe that was said in a board meeting since I've been here. But right now, we need to get started with the preface. Does anyone have any changes? Trustee Foss?
Chair, to do this correctly, we should have a motion on the table. And that we review and edit sequentially the current draft of the library performance evaluation policy.
Okay, by any chance you have that written out?
Pardon?
By any chance you have that written out or is not?
Oh, yeah, I've got it right.
Point of order.
Trustee Blank?
You can start discussion on did we operate under Robert's Rules of Order for small boards? And discussion can start before a motion. And that we were operating absolutely illegal or absolutely legally. I don't think that a motion is needed for us to continue discussion. It is not, we can pull out Robert's Rules of Order for small and look at the sections for small boards. And you will see that discussion can start without a motion.
Okay, the point of order is partially well taken. We can do it that way. We can actually do it either way. Either way is appropriate. And there is a motion on the floor. It has been moved that we review and edit sequentially the current draft of the library director performance evaluation policy. So now that is before the board.
All right.
So Trustee Foss?
So I have a number of edits, but I can hand them out when I get to it. But the first paragraph.
So don't we have to go through the motion first?
No, the motion is doing this sequentially and.
We discussed this all that's in 20, I think 20, chapter 28 of Robert's Rules of Order. And we discussed all this last time, so.
We only discussed the paragraph we're working on.
Our business.
Okay,
I
don't get it. I really don't get it.
Go read chapter 23.
There's a motion on the table, and that requires a discussion and then a vote. And I mean, if you would like to pull out Robert's Rules of Order and show me, but otherwise it's a point of order.
Okay, the chair is against your point of order. It is not well taken because Robert's Rules of Order said that this is how you actually do it for a document, editing a document. So, all right, so Trustee Foss, you said that you had.
Yes,
Edits.
just as clarification, when we do it sequentially, the only thing we can talk about is the paragraph section discussing. We can't talk about other things. So this is why there's a motion to follow it sequentially. So these are just simple things. Library director should not be capitalized. It's not a specific name. It's library director Joe. You capitalize it, but it's library director. All of them in that paragraph should be lowercase, and so should directors. And actually, board, since we're not talking about naming the board. So there's several places in there. That's my comment. We can discuss that.
Okay, Director?
Just as some clarification, so like I've said before, usually the director has like the policy, and then changes that are discussed are changed by this director and staff. In this case, a trustee delivered it in a document that can be edited. I just want clarification from me ahead of time. Are these changes going to be updated drafts by the trustee that sent it, or am I now going to be making edits to this document? Just for clarity for my note taking and my understanding. I'm happy to do either, but again, it's not clear to me what the board is asking me to do.
Trustee Hanley?
I believe, and it's a good question. I'm not going to answer the question, but, and I would be happy if staff and library director taking care of the edits, but I do believe I provided it in electronic form so that it can be done. So you don't want to just type it from scratch. That helps the chair understand. So I do believe the director has electronic form of this policy.
Yeah, actually, or it worked well last time, that Trustee Plas did the edits and then sent them to the director, and that way it didn't take up her time.
And
Trustee
that's
Plas?
why I'm clarifying.
I don't know.
Doing the work, you're being.
I don't know.
Okay, Trustee Plas?
So see,
So the motion is to go through and agree sequentially, paragraph by paragraph, on what we're going to change. And then we vote at the end to accept those changes. These are just edits at this point. The motion did not ask to send it to approve it for legal counsel. I doubt that we even get that far. So we're editing it. I have a copy of things I'd like to do, but that may not be what other people want. So I can hand out what I would like to use.
Okay, so it probably would be a good idea to go one thing at a time.
Yep.
is he making the edits? So who's selecting what we decide on?
Well,
I have a lot of them, but I don't know if you're going to accept them.
okay, typically doesn't the person acting as secretary? Okay,
I can delegate, but it's secretary.
So I would recommend that the board assign the staff person, the director, the secretary to make those changes.
okay, yeah, if it could be done in a timely manner. I know that your plate is really full.
Well, our next board meeting is, I think, the 21st.
Mhm.
So it depends on if that is to get everything revised and how much the revisions are, and if you're sending it to legal, and there's time for that as well.
Okay, actually, I'll make the notes on my copy, and then that way you don't have to deal with it, and then I'll have it all ready whenever we get done with it.
I'm making awesome.
Sorry, Trustee Plas?
I'm making notes as I go also, so we can compare.
All right, so do we have any consensus on decapitalizing library director?
Can I finish that?
Oh.
Is it acceptable? Do I email you this version? Because we don't normally send emails back and forth. So I don't know if you have the electronic version of this.
Yes, yeah, it was sent out already.
Oh, it is? Okay. I didn't know it was out. I'm sorry. Pardon.
Okay, so consensus on library director being capitalized or not being capitalized? Trustee Mike?
It is capitalized in North Dakota's, when North Dakota uses this paragraph, it's capitalized.
Shouldn't be.
Okay, well, it could be a title. I'm fine with it either way.
I'm indifferent.
So should we move on then?
Yeah.
Do we have anything else in the preface? Okay, then do we have
Yeah, I have something.
trustee Blank?
Yeah, thank you. So, the evaluation is to determine how well the director is meeting the job description and accomplishing library goals. And so that would be what I would have to point out to the board, that library goals need to be clearly identified in order to evaluate the director. That's just a comment.
Okay, yeah, it seems like that's in the form. Yes, Director?
I would point the board to the Idaho Commission for Libraries Trustee Manual, page 115. They do have an entire section on director performance appraisal, and then it also has purposes of the performance appraisal. And many of the items that were listed in the next section under objective, but I won't go there, are actually taken from this section as well. But I think respecting the Idaho Commission and the Idaho standards for library directors is probably most appropriate over another state. Different states have different laws. And so I will read this part. Their opening for director performance appraisal is boards of trustees are evaluating their library director all the time by instinct on what they see in the library and hear from the public, as well as the feel and reputation of the library. The performance appraisal is closely tied to the successful implementation of the library's strategic plan. A formal written performance appraisal is an essential management practice. The evaluation of the library director is the foundation of the evaluation process for the library as a whole. So what I really like about this is it's clearly putting the library strategic plan as an emphasis, and it's evaluating the library as a whole. I would recommend that the board consider using more of the language from the commission rather than from other states.
Trustee Hanley?
I'm certain I did look at the Idaho Commission for Libraries manual in that section there. So I guess I chose not to use that and use this instead. And it's just a guess. I mean, since trustee Blank brought up the North Dakota or South Dakota policy, it's very likely, very possible, I'll say, that whatever they have was possibly an ALA product. And I don't have any recollection of going to that state's website or anywhere else. So I'm just guessing it's a cookie cutter generic verbiage that I lifted there, and it happened to be at that one state. I can't guarantee it. I did this a month ago at least, so I'm not sure it's important where the stuff came from anyway, but I'm open to suggestions from wherever.
All right, Director?
To clarify or to point out, I noticed that that's quote, a formal comma written performance appraisal. That last, I guess it's the second to last sentence, is in common in both documents. Again, I would encourage that the sentence in the commission's guide be also included, that the performance appraisal is closely tied to the successful implementation of the library strategic plan. It also talks.
So that would be the.
So what specific words would you like to add?
Well, yeah, well, right before that sentence, in the end, a formal written performance appraisal, in that preface, the sentence in the commission before it is the performance appraisal is closely tied to the successful. So here is the formal,
Okay.
and it's right before it. The performance appraisal is closely tied to the successful implementation of the library's strategic plan.
Trustee Foss?
Considering I don't care for our strategic plan, I don't want to refer to it at this point. We can change that. This document some other day, but I'd assume not have that sentence.
All right, Trustee Blank?
I would support putting in the successful implementation of the strategic plan. Because that's, first of all, what is in it, it makes it more closely tied to our state commission, but also the strategic plan is how that shows how the library itself is operating, which is the responsibility basic responsibility of the director. And that is how we've always evaluated our directors in the past, is looking at what's going on with the strategic plan, how is that being implemented? So I think it's a good big look at how the director is doing at the library.
Right, do we have any consensus on adding that wording?
I would like to.
Okay, so we have one for it.
No.
Okay, no. Okay, so we do not have, oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I would just say that I think it's, and this is more just under the board advisement element of my job, that it's important that the board thinks of this as a policy, as an institutional policy, rather than a right now policy. And so I'm concerned by the comment that was made, someone isn't happy with something right now, and so we're not going to do this. This is a policy that is for your director evaluation, not just me. It's for in perpetuity, essentially. And so the board needs to make the best decision and put the language in the policy with that in mind, not as a just right now moment.
Okay, and then, oh, trustee Hanley?
I had a similar thought to trustee Plus with regard to the strategic plan. I'm certain that there are things there we're going to wish to change in the future. And I don't like to necessarily be tied to the strategic plan in doing this, doing a performance evaluation, even though, I mean, generally speaking, I guess you have vision statements, you have strategic plans, you have business plans on down the way till you get more specific. And I feel like we probably need to update the strategic plan, but then we can add this verbiage, say a year from now. So that's just my thought. I don't have the timing on it. I'm not greatly opposed to it, but I'm also open to the idea of adding this in, let's say a year from now, or whenever we visit the strategic plan for the first time.
Okay, so consensus has failed on adding that. Trustee Claus?
I think the evaluation should be done on by the evaluation form. If we want to change wording about strategic plan or add a section in that, when we get to the forms, let's put what we want to evaluate on. The other is the next to the last sentence. We're mixing appraisal and evaluation. That was going on throughout this document. I prefer that we strike appraisal and put evaluation. Let's just stick to the one word instead of appraisal that keeps getting scattered in here.
Okay, I'm good either way. Do we have a consensus on that? Okay, so we strike appraisal throughout the entire document. Okay, evaluation. Well then, shall we accept the preface as amended? Do we have consensus on that?
Yes.
Yes?
No.
Okay,
That is, I'm sorry, a point of order. The consensus rule is different than majority rule. Consensus rule means that we've worked to find a solution that everyone agrees to. This is not, I am not agreeing to it. I think it should have something stated in there concerning the strategic plan. So a majority rule, I mean, you can move forward however you want, but that you do not have consensus.
oh, well, that's how we've always done it the entire time I've been on the board.
Right, and I looked it up and we do not have consensus. Consensus is when we work toward a solution that works for everyone. We are not working toward that. You have a majority that want to do that, but you do not have consensus.
Take a vote on it.
If we could do that at the end, at this point, we could move on to the objective section. Do we have any changes there? Okay, hearing.
I do have a question.
Trustee Blank?
You don't remember where these come from? Do they look to the director to be, I should have checked our trustee manual. Do they look appropriate?
Director?
Yes, 1, 2, 3, 4. So the Idaho Commission was 7, And those seem to be the first 7. And so it looks like the difference would be the last 2 bullet points to assess individual performance in relation to expectations and goals, and to be used to make fair and equitable decisions regarding job tenure and compensation. So it does not look like those are currently in what is labeled purposes of the performance appraisal in the commission, and then labeled objective in this document. I would again say that it's unclear what goals you're referring to if you're not meeting strategic goals.
Further discussion on that section, trustee Claus?
In every performance evaluation I had in my 44 years of my career, there was always in the evaluation, there was a goals for the coming year. And that was used as part of the evaluation. We haven't got to the form, but that's where the goals need to be.
There are no further changes. We will move on to the process section. Trustee Claus?
So this first sentence, parentheses, volunteer, that we need to strike that doesn't belong in that was a note, I guess, but
Yeah, okay, so
it shouldn't be in the document. So I don't know what we want to do with that.
trustee Hanley?
And we're referring to the parentheses there where it says voluntary question mark if yes, then may submit. Throughout my entire career, and that was 41 years worth, I've always been asked to provide and submit my input on what my accomplishments were. And then it was up to my supervisor, manager, boss to then pick and choose what they wish, because most of the time, the bosses don't know everything that the person is being evaluated did. And even that may be their job, they don't always do that. So it was most of the time in the individual's best interest to submit a list of their accomplishments. They're probably not going to say what didn't get done. It's usually going to be rosy and positive, but so I don't think it should be mandatory that the person being evaluated submit input on the evaluation, but I think it should be encouraged and certainly welcomed. If that's what this discussion is surrounding on that particular, it does say for anybody's, the director submits accomplishments for performance input or a self-evaluation to the board chair 30 days prior to the regularly scheduled evaluation period end date. So that was my thought.
Director, so is that voluntary or is it part of like the contract or law or?
So this, I've heard a couple of comments about in my career and in this industry and in this field, and I would just really encourage the board to contact who we've identified as an industry leader, June Garcia. And I have reached out to her and I did give that information. And so I would really encourage the board to avoid this sort of like based on my previous experience and work more towards based on the professional recommendations of the consultant. And so it's unclear to me what an accomplishment is understood. It's understood what a self-evaluation is. And performance input, I'm not quite sure what that is meaning. I think it's more for the board to be like, we will take your input into advisement or something, but I understand what a list of accomplishments are. I've often been asked to provide lists of training that I've attended, or a self-evaluation has been the past practice for Community Library Network for previous directors. So I understand what a list of accomplishments and self-evaluation. I don't understand. I think maybe the board would want to clarify that which will be used or input into the evaluation. I think specifying that more clearly. I would also recommend instead of using the term chairman, just replace that with chair throughout the document.
Trustee Claus?
would suggest that on the form, we have a section for director accomplishment list, and it's in the form, and if she chooses to give it to us, we put it in the form. If she chooses not to, it's still there, but it's blank. So I would say that it shouldn't be a may, but we should just have accomplishments and strike performance, input, self-evaluation, because I think what we're asking is not for her to evaluate herself, we're asking for a list of accomplishments.
Director?
So I would just clarify that in Community Library Network, past practice has been John Hartung, Amy Yorota, that they actually did fill out the form, did put their goals and their accomplishments in, did rate themselves. So using the exact form that the board will then evaluate is what I've seen copies of. So there has, for the last 40 years, I believe, been a self-evaluation component. And so I would just maybe caution making it a change unless it's really understood that that is a change in practice.
Okay, but you would like performance, it's input taken out?
I would just take performance input taken out, but I would also add that the director submit this and the board will include in the evaluation process. Usually what happens is that the board's evaluation, the director's evaluation are what are part of the final record.
Okay, so do we have consensus on removing performance input? Trustee Blank?
I would like to say, this is before your question. I would like to say that I would like to see something, a standard form, whether that be that the director submits the self-evaluation using the form that, or something like that, but something standard that can be looked at so that it's not all over the map.
I should also add that all CLN staff have a self-evaluation, and there is a form for other employees. It has just not been used for the director.
Is it appropriate for the director?
You should expect more of me. It's good, it's general, but in terms of expectations, it should be a little bit higher.
Okay, so the performance input, shall we take that out? Yes. Okay. Trustee Blank?
I would like to ask the director, would filling out the regular form be adequate?
No, we haven't been doing, we're getting already just because we haven't established the habit of talking to the chair. Not that I'm some big egocentric person, it's just that it prevents the.
Okay, the question that I would like to ask the director is, can I ask the director a question?
Yes.
Okay, is the, just for clarification for right now, is the evaluation form that the board uses adequate for the self-evaluation for the director? Is there a different form? Is there a form we could put in here?
What did we use with Director Rhoda? Does she use?
This one, yeah, we use the one.
So
Okay, well, why don't we just continue that since it's.
I was asking her a question. It looked like she had not a black and white answer.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a complex response. I would recommend something less than this and more than what the staff fill out.
So is there any chance that we could have the director herself give us a form that she feels would be a good self-evaluation form to include in this?
Actually, I would like that, and then we can go over the three forms and figure out which one we like best.
I think that would be appropriate. I also feel like getting June Garcia involved, again, I'm gonna mention that this is a professional that we have a relationship and can call if the board doesn't feel comfortable with me drafting it.
Sure.
Okay, Trustee Foss?
So I almost call a point of order, but I think a separate topic completely is the evaluation form. I believe there are numerous changes that should be made to it, and we're not discussing that now. So I think we need to stay focused on the paragraph so we can keep going. The form needs work. It's way too cumbersome, in my opinion, to have every single topic be merged and evaluated. You can make comments about it. You can do satisfactory, unsatisfactory, but the trustees should not be, there should be one overall performance scale that the trustees make.
Okay,
That's my opinion.
your point of order is well taken. You're right, we're not discussing the form right now. We're discussing the process section. Trustee Blank?
My request at this point in time was absolutely in the process on the first sentence, because we were talking about the director's self-evaluation, and I made a suggestion that the director work on a self-evaluation form for this right here, this first bullet point or whatever it is, in order to have it a standardized answer. And that seemed that, so I wasn't going outside of this sentence.
Okay, she doesn't need to be authorized to do that. She can do that on her own and she can bring that to us. Do we?
So you're saying that we will have no form attached to this?
Well,
No self-evaluation
We aren't done
form?
yet. And
More later.
yeah, so we're in the
That's not what I'm
business
talking about.
section. Trustee Hanley?
Two comments. One, I chose knowingly not to contact June Garcia, not because I know her personally. I knew the name. That was part of the library director search process, I believe. But this is not such a technical, complex process that we need to spend the money to hire a consultant on how to do a performance evaluation. And then going back to where we are now, if we're saying we're editing the first bullet, I'm fine with what they agreed to, taking out performance input and leaving the rest of it there. And if we want to cross out voluntary, if yes, then they submit. But I think it should be voluntary. Nobody should be forced to put in their input, but if they are, I don't care either way. So are we wordsmithing still the first bullet? Is that what we are?
Yes, so we have consensus on taking out the notation there, voluntary, if yes, then may submit. Okay, so that is out. Okay, and then do you guys want to just put may submit in there rather than submit? I trustee Blas.
So my suggestion is, it's on the form that she can list her accomplishments, so it's there, and that's the standard process. So I don't think we should put may, but if she chooses not to, you can't make her. So just put submits, that's the process.
All right, do we have any further changes, Director?
I did make a comment about changing chairman to chair throughout the document. I think that's just more professional language.
Actually, I think Robert's Rules of Order says either one is fine, and I don't really care.
Okay.
Something.
Heard.
Okay, trustee Blank.
If our director asks, why not? I think that it is a neutral term.
Refer the board to their other policies, which
You don't have the
they
floor. You need to obtain the floor first. We're trying to get better at that. I know it's a habit that we all need to work on. Trustee Blank.
So I'd like to hear what the director had to say.
Okay, so chairman is perfectly appropriate. I don't think that we need to spend the time
Okay.
to change it.
I asked her to hear what the
Oh,
director
okay, but
had.
that doesn't mean that you control the next person who speaks.
I didn't. I just asked if I could hear what the director had to say. You called on me. That was what I asked.
Director?
2 points of clarification. First, the board should be considering clarity of language throughout all of their policies. I know for a fact that we talked about public speaking in the public meeting, it refers to the chair. So consistency across all of your policies is a goal or an ideal. I would also say that just in general advisement, that a lot of this work that's being done is usually what's being done by the committee, so that there's a more formal document that can be recommended by the committee for the whole board. We're out of time right now, and so not very much has gotten done. And so again, I think the real process of this board should be a committee meeting, and then my concerns, my recommendations can be included in those, and then the committee can make a recommendation to the full board. Any thoughts?
I agree. We didn't get to have a committee meeting. This, when it was put out, was the first I saw of it. I was on the committee. We should start doing committees for policies, but I believe we just didn't have time. I thought we were gonna do this in the middle of November, and so we just went to discuss here. Maybe it should be taken back to the committee. Otherwise, we table it and continue on with this.
Okay, so then shall we postpone this to our next meeting, and then maybe you guys can get together as a committee? Treasurer?
I've already sent some concerns about the law and how it's applied in this policy to legal counsel. So I would encourage, getting a memo maybe back from legal counsel that the committee can review to give us a jump start on some of those items and his weigh in on those.
I thought legal review was like after things were fairly approved, because otherwise you send things to them and send things to them and send things to them, and it end up gonna cost a whole lot more. Anyway, we were moving on to the next section, because that section. Yeah, we're moving on to the next section.
I'm gonna ask, I
So
have
we
my
are-
hand up. Point of order, I have my hand up.
Okay, but the time for that section is done.
I am not asking about that
So
section.
we are, no, I'm not just talking about that section in the library.
Okay, point of order then, point of order.
The trustee will state a point of order.
Yes, I would like to remind us all that committee meetings need to be handled as regular meetings, and please notify all of us when and where they're being handled. And I think the secretary needs to be in attendance.
Okay, that was not a point of order. A point of order is to bring it to the attention of everyone that something is being done wrong, like it's against Robert's rules or something else. That was just you continuing to speak. So anyway, we are moving on to the next section, which is the discussion on material selection policy. So the motion is on the board for that one. Okay, I don't have it, but if I remember correctly, it was that we were going to go through this. Oh, wait, that's the other policy. All right, so this has been, trustee Boss.
This was brought back from legal counsel, and I think there are several changes. I would like to approve sequentially the current draft of the materials policy to send back to legal counsel for review.
Okay, it has been moved that we approve sequentially the current draft of material selection policy to send to legal counsel for without objection, Lindsay will, Assistant Director will speak.
In our last meeting, I thought it was decided that the attorney was going to review this, and that would probably not be wise for us to spend a great deal of time until we understand that our policy is legally aligned. So I don't know why we'd be talking about this. We haven't heard from the attorney.
He gave us a kind of a legal review last time, so I think we could work on those. Trustee Boss?
Yeah, I think it was clear. We talked about it. He suggested taking out the in part there were numerous things. He even suggested putting multiple level of definition of nudity for different ages. He talked about it quite a bit. We have to do something with it now and give it back to him if we're going to make any changes, or else approve it. And I have several changes I would like to propose. If we approve any other changes, it should go back again. That's why the motion's on the table. And my first,
Is this on the first section? Is it sequentially?
Can I ask a question?
No, because trustee Plasto has authority.
I made copies of my changes, but I don't have a color printer, so I put it in italics. Under material, under definitions, section C.
Hold on. So the motion is that we approve sequentially the current draft of materials selection policy.
I'm saying I don't have anything until that section.
Oh,
So if
okay.
there's anyone else has something before that.
Okay, so statement of purpose and intent for policy, without objection. Okay.
Council Boyles mentioned that there were several things that needed to be added to the policy. And I recall specifically staff protections, but some other language. And so I don't know where or what that is. And so I'm not sure that working through some of those details is going to be appropriate until we find out with more exactness what needs to be added. So I have concerns about approving any section or allowing the board to approve any section without knowing which has been omitted, which legal counsel believes needs to be included.
Okay, so we're gonna go through this sequentially, and then there'll be time at the end to add things to, wherever. And okay, so if there are no changes to that statement of purpose and intent for policy, we will move on to.
I didn't have a chance to chime in on this one.
Trustee Blank?
I would not approve this until we have input from our attorney. And so I'm just telling you that I think that, I'd like to say that he was not here to give us all my notes say he had many changes. So each one of these paragraphs may have changes. And what we are trying to do here is to make it so that we don't bring a lawsuit down on us. So I think that we need the attorney to look at it. So until the attorney is able to look at this section, I would not agree to it.
Okay, so we're not approving the policy or even the section. We're just saying that we got through that section without changes, but there may be changes later at the end. So, Trustee Hanley?
I just want to make a clarification for myself. So we're going through this a second round based on input we got verbally from council. And then we're going to submit this newly, I assume, amended version to council as our final product before he chops on it. Is that correct?
That's my understanding of it. Looks like Trustee Plas is nodding. Okay, so then without Director?
So I do have one in that first section. I noticed that we are citing a Supreme Court case in that first section from 2003, and I'm understanding Boyles has mentioned several cases. I'm wondering if we shouldn't ask for a recommendation of a more appropriate citation. He mentioned recent cases. He also, I think one of the trustees mentioned that this was related to the Children's Internet Protection Act, which is internet and is different than some of the materials that were relating to the First Amendment and print materials and different things. So I would recommend that the board request specifically of council review if there's a more appropriate citation.
All right, we can do that. All right, and if there are no further objections, we're moving on to the objective and scope of policy. Director told me that using the phrase "the board" in there is recommended by Idaho Commission for Libraries that we not do that because it's an institutional policy. It's not a board policy or something like that. Anyway, so sometimes it seems like it is appropriate to use it because it's just talking about generic board, but this one is talking about the board at this time. So I was thinking, or this specific board, where it says, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, the fourth line down, contemplated by or known to the board. I was thinking maybe we could just take out the words by or known to the board. Trustee Blank?
So who was talking to you about this?
The director had mentioned it.
So this was the advice,
Director?
yeah, of the commission, Clay Ritters, with the state commission. He mentioned that it is an institutional document and boards change, and that it's better form, if you would, or language in a document like this, that you don't identify at a point in time, that it's more, you know, this policy should last at least 3 years. The board will change within that 3 years. So take or neutralize that if possible.
So this taking,
Trustee Blank?
is taking out known to the board, does that meet that standard?
I'm not
Director?
sure I understand the purpose of this sentence. It kind of seems like to avoid liability of the current board is kind of how I'm interpreting it or reading it currently. And so I think you could take out that entire sentence.
Trustee Hanley?
I think it shows that we're not focusing on a particular work or piece of material, and it's basically a legal sentence, in my opinion, that says we're not doing this because we don't like genderqueer or whatever goofy books are out there. It's strictly to say, we're not doing this, we're not making this move, we're not putting this policy into effect because there is a work out there that we oppose. And I think that it was a much higher standard, this is where we are on this, as to the materials on the shelf now versus what we're purchasing in the future. And so I don't want to get caught up in the legal thing that says we're doing this because we want to get rid of book X out of the library. So I think it's got value. And I think maybe that's a good question for legal counsel. I'm not qualified specifically on that, but maybe that's a good question for another notation on our policy for legal counsel, at least to double check it.
Trustee Claus?
I did try to take that sentence out, and by consensus, I was overruled to leave it in. I can see the value, and I am behind taking out the words by or known to the board and just leaving it during the enactment of the policy.
Okay, so far we have 2 for taking it out. Trustee Claus, you're good with it?
I'm okay with it.
Okay,
If it passes legals.
okay. All right.
Can we reemphasize, what are we taking out exactly?
The words by or known to the board. Right, any further changes to that section? Seeing that there are none, we will move on to the responsibility section. Does anyone have any changes there? Okay, well then, we'll move on to the next section, which is definitions as used in this policy. Trustee Blass?
So the change on this that I want to do is, I overlooked my word, but the very last sentence on that page, take the words taken as a whole or in part out, the 2 commas before and after. So it would just read, when the material or performance has any of the following characteristics. So take out comma taken as a whole or in part comma.
Okay, that's blank.
That is, I think that the attorney was looking at that section, that very carefully, and taking that out as a whole, that taking that part out based upon the case that he gave us will be open us wide open, may set us wide open for a legal confrontation. Because that is Idaho code, that is federal constitution taken as a whole. And, you know, you have any of this other in there as a part, and, you certainly can take it out, but this will go back to the attorney, and I would hope that it would simply be struck so that he can see that you want this taken out. I don't agree with that.
That was not my understanding of what he said. We could take it out and again, just ask him specifically about that part.
Can we make sure that it shows a strike through so that he knows that that was taken out there?
Trustee Foss?
So the attorney, Boyles specifically said, recommended we don't put the in part. I had trouble with that. This taken as a whole comes from it's not constitutional. It comes from Supreme Court Miller case where they were talking about removing books. We are talking about buying books. The courts cannot tell us how we have to use our money and what budget we need to have and what kind of books we have to buy. It says in the case that he brought from Wano County that libraries have wide discretion on their selection policy. So this taken as a whole applies to the Miller case about taking books out of the library. The Wano County case specifically said, once the books are in the library, then it's a First Amendment issue that you would be taking what's available to the public and withholding it from the public. So these are books that we have not bought, and we have wide discretion on how we set our policy. So we're not talking about in whole or in part. We can say, you know, what if there's no books that were even published and that meet the description, or what if we don't have the money? This is our acquisition policy. So I believe it should be taken out.
Right. We've already had consensus on that, so we move on. Anything else in that first section, or shall I move on to the average person PT? Okay, there was no objection, so we're moving on to section A under definitions. There's no comment on that. We will go on to section B.
We'd like to recognize the assistant director.
Oh, if there's no objection.
I object.
Oh, no, I mean, the director just asked that she be recognized.
She's
Well, the
not a
director.
board member. She doesn't.
The director just asked that she be recognized.
Okay, so point of order according to Robert's rules, if there's an objection, then we can't go there.
So that was consent to recognize somebody that's not on board.
Okay, so on section B.
So the board was recognizing me.
No board.
Yeah, so I would like to be recognized, and I've been discussing implementation with the assistant director, and I'd like her to communicate about this next section.
That is appropriate.
That's a pretty graciousness on the board's behalf.
We need that
think it's
information.
ungracious.
Yes, but according to Robert's rules, if there's an objection, then
Well,
that's.
what
there was-
specifically is the objection? She's behaved professionally. She's has 3 decades of library experience. This is a very significant policy,
Okay,
and
so-
she directly reports the staff that implement it.
Okay, okay, point of order.
We are going through the policy sequentially, and we've got limited time. We need to get through the rest of it. I am not, as a board member, do not want to divert the discussion to other things.
Okay, and
Please continue with the motion.
the point of order is well taken. We are now on to section B because there's not debate when there's an objection, and they're just, that's the end of it. All right, so any changes to section B? Okay, if there are no, excuse me, if there are no changes to section B, we will move on to section C,
What, section C?
under definitions. So we're on page 2.
The material.
And
Oh, it towards the top. Starts with the material. Okay, if there are no changes there, then we will move on to section A, showing or description of. Trustee Boss?
I thought you were going line by line there. I guess C is, I was looking at the definition of material. I don't know if that's part of C or I think that's a separate thing. So can I add to material definition?
Sure.
Okay. So it ends now with or other media, videotape or other media. And I would like to add a comma or any downloadable or online digital content, period.
Okay, or any downloadable what?
Downloadable or online digital content. So some things that you look at on the internet don't actually download. You're looking at a program that's running and so it's content.
Okay, Trustee Blank?
Oh, so we're going to monitor everybody who sits at a computer? Is that what's going on? We have everybody, we have a staff member who stands next to the person who's on the computer while they're using it. I don't know how we monitor that. I mean, is that what we're talking about?
There are filters and it's federally
We are
required.
we are filtered.
Trustee Claus?
So I don't know the details, but other libraries do this. So we're talking about anyone under 18 should not be able to get downloadable or online digital content that meets these definitions. I understand that maybe some services, Overdrive maybe isn't as good or doesn't do it, but if you go to Bibliotheca, they have filters. So if somebody has a card that they're getting on and they're under 18, it would not allow this material. So no, I'm not asking for anybody to stand there and supervise use. I'm asking for us to establish a service, which I know can be done, that prevents minors from downloading this material.
Director?
So it's really unclear to me what the trustees have been talking about. The library has an internet use safety policy. And so that is an aspect of what one trustee was just talking about, like downloading and safety. We do have filters in place that makes us compliant. So I'm not understanding what is meant by the words downloadables and online digital content. I brought up last time about the lack of this policy and the deselection policy, including electronic resources. And it was sort of determined then that that wasn't important in deselection. And so again, I'm not understanding what specifically, are you talking about library paid subscription services that include e-resources? I would need more clarity. I mean, this policy goes down to the detail of CD-ROM disk, which we have pretty much none of. And yet when we're adding content like downloadable or online digital content to this policy, it seems to be in conflict with our other policy because of its lack of clarity and specificity. So I would recommend to the board that they be very specific, whether it's paid subscription databases, e-materials, content, audio book, and again, I would remind the board that we are part of the CIN network and some of those databases are shared. And so our content is a shared pool. Other libraries have the ability to access and add materials to that. So even though you're saying you believe that it can be done, I'm not exactly sure what you're saying you think can be done.
Trustee Boss?
This policy, if we add this, would make anything for under 18-year-old. I think you could only determine if they're under 18 if they use their own card, minor's card. So they could not download or look at anything, whether it's, we have to find a way to deal with it. And going to a different service than Overdrive can do it. I'm not going to tell the library director how to do their job, but this would mean minors could not get digital content from the library that violates this policy. It's just that simple.
Director?
So the board has already done quite a bit of work on this topic, and that is the minor cards. We have a children's card, and we will soon have what we kind of call a teen card. Those cards do not have online access. So already in a different policy, so you have two other policies. You have the internet policy and you have your children's card policy. Those items are already, I think, doing what you're asking. So I haven't heard yet anything specific. So are you talking about in this policy that is labeled material selection, not open internet access? You have a policy for that. Library cards, you have a policy for that. The board has already done that work. And so I'm not clear in what you're meaning, again, by downloadable or online digital content.
Trustee Fox?
The chair, this is anything the library provides that is downloadable or has online digital content. It's that simple. If it's audio books, if it's other kinds of services that provide video, if it's video games, whatever. And probably the minor card is the only way you can do it. So maybe the job is already done and this is not a burden to the library staff. I just simply want to make it clear in here that online material doesn't get a go free pass under this policy. It's material too. It's material as much as a CD-ROM or any of this. This is kind of a outdated definition, and I just want to update it by adding downloadable and online digital content.
Trustee Blank?
Is that covered in other media?
No, to be honest, I actually understand what the trustee is asking for, and that's, I actually see the import of us putting it on our deselection policy more than in this policy. I do hear, and I am understanding, I'd like to recommend that I do a review of other libraries and see how they've included their digital content in their selection. I made some recommendations, and when we get to the next policy, I think that is a good point. I would like to see some deselection of e-materials. So if it's possible, I just need more clarity. It's not understood to me what is meant. And so I'd like to review what other libraries have maybe used as language for that.
Sure.
Trustee Fox?
So I'd like to move on. I'd like to take a vote if we need to and leave it there. The deselection withdrawal policy has looser definitions. That's why it's a separate policy. And that policy is tailored to the Llano County case where the court said you have to be a lot more careful on what you take out of the library. This is what we're buying. So this is just simply anything that we offer, find a way to make sure anybody that is under 18 is not getting it. If their parent is logging in and getting it, that's the parent doing it. So it's just that simple.
Trustee Hanley?
I have no objection if adding this in adds clarification that electronic stuff, regardless of where it comes from, is included in how we acquire material for a library and specifically in this area for minors. So when you take a vote, I'll probably be yes.
Director?
I would just, I know legal counsel is going to be reviewing this. I would just express concern that it seems to be some language might be in conflict with your other policy on internet. That since this is lacking specificity about direct or CLN provided resources, and it's just open and vague about downloadables or online content, that it may be in violation of your other policy that's already been adopted.
Okay, so then we have consensus on changing that, and that's obviously something that will be run by.
Point of order, we don't have consensus because I'm not agreeing.
Okay, well, the majority agree. Otherwise, you would never be able to go through any. I mean, you'd have to have a motion for every single sentence or paragraph.
I'm just saying you don't have consensus. I don't agree.
Okay, the majority agrees to change the draft. So we're not changing a policy, we're changing a draft. So you're adding a comma or any downloadable or online digital content. The caveats that we will double check with our legal counsel. All right, so moving on. Does anyone have any problem with the next partial sentence? Or is there any changes that need to be made, Director?
I just remember Counsel Boyles mentioning that that we should use the language in Idaho, not, I don't know where it was, somewhere else in definitions. And so I'll just insert, do you remember that part? He said something, Counsel Boyles, I don't know if I have it, but he said something about, is this from Kansas? Where is this from? There's the Oklahoma, I apologize to Kansas, but Oklahoma language in definitions, and that it needed to be Idaho because we're in Idaho and it's Idaho law. So I don't specifically know what that difference would be, but I remember him saying that. So I'm just going to object based on that. Counsel's not here and he can't clarify.
Okay, I remember him talking about the Idaho definitions, but I don't remember him saying that we needed to change our definitions. Trustee Blank?
I remember him suggesting that we change them to match Idaho's definition.
Trustee Hanley?
I suggest they remain as written and that we vote, assuming there's a vote taken. If legal counsel tells us otherwise, then we can change this again. But I think it's a pretty clear definitions here. And I don't know that I care particularly what state they came from. It's basically pretty clear, I think.
Trustee Fox?
So we are not trying to arrest people or turn them over to the sheriff. We're not having to match criminal law in Idaho. And that's what that other definition is part of the statute for a misdemeanor. This is how we buy our books. And we have, from the Llano County Library case, it says that libraries have great discretion in setting their purchasing or their acquisition policies. We can use a definition and it doesn't have to match Idaho criminal law. So I would like to keep it here.
Treasurer?
So I would just say if we're not having to match any specific law and the definition has more latitude, then I would recommend this based on me being personally offended, that we have a policy that has the word turgid state. I'm also not very in the belief that we should have sadomasochistic abuse or flagellation or torture in a policy. I think that it can be written in a way that people understand and it is not so graphic. There's been some staff feedback that perhaps in order to view this policy, we should require the staff be 18, like you do when you go to sites that sell alcohol or tobacco. These are very offensive to me personally, so I would recommend if we're not held to a legal standard, that we have a moral standard.
Trustee Blank?
I would also like to say, if we're not going to use Idaho language, why are we using another state's? I don't understand that.
Trustee Hanley?
It's unfortunate that in this day and age, we need to use such explicit words in here, but that's just what's going on. That's where we are. And if that's what's necessary in a policy, I say we leave it there. It's probably not as bad as some of the books that were in the library.
Okay, so are there any specific changes to the nudity section or should we move on? Okay, without objection, we're moving on to the selection process. I wanted to bounce something off of you guys. The second sentence or the second line there where it says informational, educational, and recreational needs. How do you guys feel about the word recreational? Because libraries were created for an educational purpose, and I don't think it's really the proper role of government to entertain people. I'm not saying that we can't have anything that's entertaining, because books, by their nature, tend to be entertaining, but I don't know that the word recreational really needs to be in there.
Yeah, like cooking, garden,
Trustee Henley?
fish.
Well, I think it's probably appropriate to have it in there. I mean, people read fiction. That's a pretty big section of the library, and I would assume fiction for the most part would be recreational. So there are magazines in the library as well, and most of those are probably, or not, I don't know, most, but some of those are there for entertainment purposes. Probably some of the movies, maybe most of the movies. So it is unfortunate we have to take taxpayer money to recreate people. But I think the library does serve a recreational purpose. It'll be a pretty big change to take it out of there, but that's all.
Right, Trustee Blake?
I would like to note the amount of money that's spent on parks throughout our country in terms of recreational, and that as a government, that entity, that's part of what we do.
Okay, does not sound like we have consensus on that. So anything else in the selection process? Okay, seeing none. On to the gifts section. Trustee Foss?
Just because I think you're going to skip and go to review a policy, I want to add a new section between gifts and review. So when you get to that.
Okay. I think there was, it would sound better. Okay, so in the gift section, the third line down, sentences, donations are evaluated using the same criteria. Just would be better English if it said the same criteria. So do we have consensus on adding word the other? So let's do Blake and Henley. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. There are no other changes to the gifts section. Trustee Ploss, you had a section you wanted to add?
Yes, this would be an underlined heading, compliance of policy. And then a sentence under it. The library director shall report to the library board regularly, but no less often than once every 2 months, comma, regarding the library's compliance with this policy.
Okay, I got it. The library director shall report to the board regularly, and then
Comma,
comment.
but no less often than once every 2 months, comma. Regarding the library's compliance with this policy. Period.
Discussion on that? You guys still ready? Do you want me to read it again?
Yeah.
Okay, the library director shall report to the board regularly, but no less often than once every 2 months regarding the library's compliance with this policy. Did you get it? Okay. Trustee Lake?
I would like to ask the director what this, I mean, how do you do this?
Director?
I mean, I think I could just do yes. I mean, I will say, I would recommend, it feels a little bit like a right now or an implementation concern is how it's appearing to me. If it needs to remain in the policy, I would recommend that it maybe change to the library board may request reports from time to time or as needed on the compliance with the policy. So it could be a demand. I don't know that a 2-month schedule is really necessary. It feels like it is an attempt by the board to threaten and intimidate staff. So I don't know if that was the intent. Again, policy setting and then implementation and then enforcement of library policies are the role of the director. And so I'm not quite sure what is intended in what would meet this need other than a yes, I'm doing my job, work in compliance with local, federal, state laws and library policies.
And it's just been a problem for a couple of years. And it didn't feel like a threat to me.
We're compliant with this policy as it's written right now. Library staff are compliant. Library staff are doing their jobs. So I don't understand what you're saying or implying in that statement either.
So we'd like an update. Trustee Henley?
I'm just not clear on what would that report on compliance look like? I mean, other than, as the director said, yes, we're doing it or we're not doing it. Are we looking for a numerical report on books that we didn't buy? I'm not necessarily opposed to this. I just make sure I understand what we're asking for by putting this in there. So.
Trustee Claus?
So no, this is not a threat. This is simply give us regular updates on the books being bought and that might be considered in this covered by this policy. Or maybe, try us. You can do a report, and if we want more clarification, we can ask. But no, a yes is not sufficient. What would be requested would be in maybe the every other month of the library director's report on the regular meetings is a list of books that were bought that maybe might have been close call to this, and the reason they were bought, or just a list of books that were bought. We're not accusing the library of not doing their job. We want to give you the flexibility to comply with the policy. We would just like updates, and it's a public record when we have the report, the library director report. So please include in it the books that were bought or the books that were of this vein that might have been considered. You can be creative. I'm not going to tell you how to do it, but I would like a public record of how we're complying with the policy.
Trustee Henley?
Maybe a solution could be, it's kind of in line with an email I sent to the director, I think it was yesterday. If the public had easy access to new purchases, then the board and or the public can monitor everything that's being added to the library. The software that drives the CIN does have reports functions according to my Wikipedia. That's as far as I went to my little research on the software. But if that software and the files we have now contain the date we purchased a book, which I expect it must be in there, even though it's not visible to the public, and if it's exportable to Excel, meaning the reports that would come out of that system, anyone can look at what was purchased between date X and date X. And I think that that would give not only the board, but the public the ability to see exactly what's being purchased in any date frame they wish to do. And I can't imagine the software doesn't have that, because somewhere, somehow, somebody knows if a book was purchased in the last 5 years, no one checked the book out. And that's why it's weeded out of the library. So it has to be based on some kind of data. And I assume that information must be contained in the software. So if this information is available and can be made public, and especially available to the board, I think we could probably monitor what's purchased on our own and not ask for a special report by the director. But if it's not there, then maybe a report is appropriate.
Trustee Fox?
So I feel the trustee is misdirecting what the statement is asking for. We, the board, are fiduciaries of the taxpayers' money, and this is a policy that is being implemented, and the taxpayers should be able to know what is going on with books and if they're being complied with. So please just make it simple, be creative, find a way. Don't make us have to go searching CIN databases and stuff. Just tell us what books were bought in the last 2 months, and if any of them were of this vein, and why they were bought, because they don't meet this. I'm just looking for accountability to us and the taxpayers on what is being bought with regard to this policy.
Oh, sorry, Director.
Since the role of the board was brought up, I also have some comments on that. The primary duties of the board is really motivating the entity to reach its goals, ensuring that the organization is adhering to legal and strong ethical standards, developing the organization's reputation, acting as a liaison between the organization's leadership and the public, assisting in strategic planning. And though a board of trustees often advises an organization on financial decisions, as you just mentioned, the focus is on the mission and the use of the assets. This means that they prioritize achieving goals and developing the most effective and productive practices. It's completely inappropriate to put this in a board policy. I don't have any problem holding staff accountable. That is my job. Ensuring that the library's policies are met is my job. It's not the board's job. And so putting a statement in here that I have to prove every 2 months that I'm doing my job and staff are doing their job is inappropriate, and it's a misdirection of this board's actual duties and role.
Taxpayer. Last.
It's not a misdirection. Maybe it's been overlooked in the past, and I don't know where you were reading from, but I just simply want some accountability, and I want a compliance. I want to show that we're in compliance with this policy. It's a big issue, and it should be very simple. Just tell us any kind of books. I don't think we need to get reports on, I don't know what books, but there may be some topics of books that we don't need to hear about, but anything that the public could construe as a violation or something on this, I would like to hear. I don't want to see another one of these Facebook from Hayden Library get posted with a book of new purchases with a book that was bought either by the library or Hayden Library, and somebody sends it to me and says, why are we buying this? Just come out up front and make it clear what we're buying and that we're complying with this. And it's very simple. We're not after anybody for not doing their job. Just show that what we're buying meets the policy and be creative.
Director?
because I want to give the board the information, and that is, I am a transparent person. I want to give the public information. I want to give the board information. But my concern is, and it's an ethical concern of the reason that that this is being added. This is not for you to hold the library or the board to hold the library staff accountable. This is so that we run a report and then therefore it can be obtained through a public records request. And I'm not comfortable with that as a reason.
I can't remember if this is a point of order, but how's the temperature for you guys? Does it feel too cold in here? So could we turn the temperature up?
You know, having HVAC issues, and so they've been working on them all day. May or may not be, so no promises.
Okay. All right. Trustee Hanley?
So to make sure I understand what trustee Plus is requesting, is he, I don't want to call it less wordy, that's not a long description here, but are you saying you would like the library director to provide a list of all the books purchased in the last 2 months and do that every 2 months? Is that what the request is? Because I don't want to add something to the policy and not know what we're asking the director to produce.
Trustee Foss?
I don't want to tell her how to do her job. I don't think we need to get a list of all the books. I've asked for it in the past because so that maybe I could see this. But if you just narrow it down to a subset of books that someone might misconstrue as violating this policy, and if there's anything in question, add a sentence why it doesn't. I don't want to have us do the work of looking through and then researching what the book is to find out if somebody's definition violates it. I'd like the library director just to give us this. And it's not just for us, it's the public. And I don't want a bunch of extra work for anybody, especially for the trustees or the public to go looking up databases. But I would like to know what kind of books we're buying that might be misconstrued as this as a violation and just make it clear.
Trustee Hanley?
But I guess I'm struggling to understand. So we're going to ask the library director to tell us the books she purchases she knows are pretty questionable and advertise that to the board. I'm not trying to go against you. I'm trying to understand what exactly are we asking for. I'm not certain myself.
Trustee Foss?
I'm just asking to show that we're in compliance with this. And I'd want to, books are bought every month. I'm not saying every month a list. If finding or giving a list of books with the description is how to do it, and I mean, that's one way. I'm not asking for that. But I think it should be reported and it should be not necessarily looking for public record, but if public wanted to look at it, they would have availability of looking at it. But we are the fiduciaries of the money, and we have an absolute right to know what the trust or the district's money is being spent on. And we are saying in this policy, we don't want anything that violates this policy purchased. So, Phyllis, and I mean, it may change over time.
Sorry, Director.
I'm feeling uncomfortable, and I'm just going to kind of express openly why I'm feeling uncomfortable. Because we're now creeping towards content-based. And so I'm going to really recommend that we not make further comment. It sounds like you want me to make lists of books for children and teens that involve areas of sexual content or homosexuality that people in the community might object to. Is that what you're asking for? And don't answer that if it is, please. But I mean, that's kind of what I'm hearing behind this sentiment. And again, this policy needs to be neutral, and implementation also needs to be neutral and cannot be based on content.
Okay, I'm kind of seeing both sides, but I'm just wondering, is there precedent for this? Has been done in another library?
Library has this very policy in it. So the guideline is this material or this policy. Anything that could be violating what's in this policy, we'd like to know about it. I'm not looking for LGBT or anything. That's not in this policy. But just anything that might meet this policy, please report it to us.
Trustee Mike, do we have stuff in the library right now that would violate this policy in the children's department, or do you feel? Yeah, thank you. I'm asking the director, I'd like to ask the director, do we have things in the library at this point that would violate this policy? Director?
No, I don't believe we do.
Okay.
We also have a process in the other policy about reconsideration, and the board has a role in that process. So that's part of the accountability that the board plays as a role. And so, again, I don't understand what is being asked, and I have concerns that it may be targeted.
Trustee Mike? I have huge concerns that's exactly what we're doing. We're wandering into areas where we are targeting some books. There are books that have been seen as violating this policy dramatically that don't at all. That have been, and so it is you ask the director to form a list of books that cause concern to a certain section of the community. You violate other sections of the community's freedom to read rights. We have to be very, very careful. And there is a very good way to address books that people don't like. And it is not by sending them, sending a picture to a trustee. It is by the reconsideration process, which is going to be implemented in our other policy, and that's how you do it. With that, I'm going to have to leave.
Thanks, Trustee Box.
So this is the selection process. This is for purchasing. We already know that once a book is in the library, First Amendment applies to it by the Llano County court case. First Amendment applies to it, and you have to give these freedoms or all these considerations to all this. This is for purchasing. Once the book is in the library, you can't just pull it out if it violates this. So this is for purchasing. That's all I'm asking is for purchasing. Anything we're buying, please report on it. And I would like to, leave it in and let legal counsel tell us if this is a bad idea or not.
Okay, do we have any kind of consensus on that? Ms. Manley?
Just two quick thoughts is, I don't think we're asking for compliance reports in any other policies that we have that are in effect or that will be coming up. And so I kind of find it a little odd that we're going to ask for a compliance report on a specific policy on a regular basis. And then we do have the public, if the public does say, hey, why did you buy this book? Well, there's the way to find out as well. And then there is the reconsideration process. So I find it a little, just seems to be a bit of an anomaly to ask for a compliance report every 2 months on one policy. And we're not asking for somebody to tell us how well we're doing with ADA compliance as well. So I don't see how I can support it as much as I'd like to. It looks like a rather possibly burdensome. I would rather have reports accessible to the public, including the board, but asking the director or the library staff to produce a list of everything they purchased in the last month or 2 months appears to me to be rather burdensome.
Trustee Fox?
Okay, I don't know why we don't get this. The selection policy is much broader than the withdrawal and the reconsideration. Once the book is in the library, you can't take it out. So or the courts have said that. We have more freedom to consider what we're buying. So that is why the focus is on this. What we're buying, don't give me that the withdrawal will take care of it. Because once it's in the library, it's too late. So I just want compliance that want things we're purchasing, and that's why it's a big concern to me, and I would think it would be to others, that we are really following the policy on what we buy. Because I don't want it to get in the library and then find out if we pull it out, it has to be put back in by going to court.
Trustee Blank?
Before I leave, I'd just like to say that it sounds like what you're saying is that we have more freedom to censor. And that is the concerns that I heard from the director as well. And I'd just like us to be aware of that. And you don't have consensus on this because I don't approve of it at all.
Okay, so censoring is, I guess we've censored every book we've ever done in the history of library. So that's not really the right use of that word. Director?
I would just point the board back to last month's trustee training from the Idaho Commission for Libraries. It talked about drafting library policy within the scope of practice. And I think number 5, all policies should be crafted to balance competing interests and avoid favoring the majority at the expense of an individual's rights. There's other things in here that I think maybe we needed to go over. Again, I understand that there's some contentiousness and there's concern and there's questions of accountability. However, again, I just want to reiterate that it's the director's role, not the trustee's role.
Okay, so I think we're about out of time for that section. So Trustee Henley, no on consensus? Okay, so consensus failed on that. Right, and I would suggest that we postpone any action on this until we're done with the other policy.
Sure.
Trustee Glass?
So there's a motion on the floor we need to vote on to approve the changes we discussed and send to legal counsel for review. And he definitely needs to review because we made changes. And I would like to send both policies, if we can get through the other, for legal review, so he can come back with both policies at the regular meeting. But then we can decide. So there's a motion that we need to vote on this.
So there's a motion on the floor. I think it would be best to wait in case our counsel is able to come if his emergency is resolved, that we could get input from him and make a better product if possible before we send it to him. If we get done with the other one, then so we just postpone until after we get done with the other policy, then we could vote on both of them at the same time if we get that far.
So the motion is on the floor. We need to vote on this. I didn't withdraw the motion. I think that it should be sent to legal counsel. He's not here. Let's not wait 2 weeks to talk to him about it.
Well, it might be at the end of the meeting anyway. Sorry, Trustee Hanley.
Well,
I was just going to suggest if we can make, I don't want to make an actual amendment to the motion yet, but can we say that this is approved pending review by legal counsel, and therefore we're kind of done with it until we get legal counsel's spin on this thing? It doesn't go into effect because it obviously needs the other policy to be approved as well and reviewed. So do we vote on this thing? Do we amend the motion? Do you think this says that we approve this pending review by legal counsel and the approval of the other policy?
Trustee Glass?
so the motion, we don't need to amend it. The motion was already there. Approve the changes that we went through in sequence and send it to legal counsel. We need to vote on that because it's on the table and be done with this right now. So it's what you're saying, only it's already there. It's not approving it like we're going to put it into force. We're approving the changes that we've discussed in sequence and sending it to legal counsel for review.
Right, and I think it's a subsidiary motion or something to postpone the motion until after something else. So I guess I move to postpone voting on the pending motion let's see, I should write this down. Trustee Hanley?
I guess what I'm asking now is, we made a number of changes in here, and I certainly wouldn't want legal counsel to review the policy absent the changes we just made today. So
That's what
I'm kind of concerned that I kind of think we need to, how we word this, but I agree, we would have, I guess we're voting to approve the changes we made in this document today. I'm not sure exactly the wording was on the motion, but I think that's what we're trying to accomplish, I believe.
Yes.
And if that's what the motion covers, then I would be in favor of having a vote on it.
Okay, Director?
Just to clarify, usually what boards do is they make a motion to ask the director to communicate to council the changes that were discussed today for their review. And then you ask for me to give direction to council about how you want that presented. Do you want language and like a marked up legal or a marked up draft of the policy? Do you want a memo? Do you want an oral report at the next meeting? Usually the board takes that action and puts that responsibility on the director to communicate with council. That's the typical motion that you would see.
So I just was saying that it might be better just in case he shows up and we can get some counsel from him
today.
Yeah, I mean, it's not likely, but it's possible. I would hate to cut that off. So that's why I wanted to postpone the pending motion until after we're done with the materials withdrawal policy.
I don't
because
know
then
if
we
you're
can-
gonna get done with that one. I would just like to do this now. And what it is an edited version of what he reviewed and what we had the last draft. So it'll have lined out things that we talked about, and we can get it, the director can take it and send it to all of us, what the changes are. And if we agree that we should be doing this on a big screen so we all see it. This is really archaic how we're doing this, but it should be sent to the legal counsel, and I'm afraid you're gonna lose your chance to do it if you don't vote now.
Well, if you want to, well, I guess if there's no further discussion, then we will go ahead and vote on the motion, which is it has been moved that we approve sequentially the current draft of the materials selection policy to send to legal counsel for review. There's no further discussion. All those in favor, say aye. Okay, the ayes have it. The motion is carried. And we approve sequentially the current draft of material selection policy to send to legal counsel for review. Now we will move on to our next section, which, we have a 5-minute break. All right, so we will come back in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
I just dated the one, I just dated today's back of the version of each of those. I don't know. I think it should be. I got both in the papers. And when you got them, just. James.
The materials withdrawal and reconsideration. We have a motion on the floor, which is I move that we approve sequentially the last draft of materials withdrawal and reconsideration policy and send to legal counsel for review. And we were at the top of page 3. We stopped right after community relevance. So we are on to the next section, which is materials and appropriate for minors. Trustee Fox?
So in this section, I would like to strike the words after the first materials. So strike produced for minors under the age of 18. And then continue. So agree materials that violate Idaho codes 1815-1513 and so forth. Just strike the produced for minors under the age of 18. And my reason for doing that is if there's a book written for about with characters that are 20 years old or 19 years old or even 18 years old. Those are the main characters. That is what the book is written for. That is a book for adults. So it doesn't meet this definition, produced for minors. It would actually be produced for adults. But I don't want to limit only books produced for minors not being able to be in here. I want this policy to apply to any materials, whether they're written for adults or whatever, cannot be in the juvenile and young adult collections. So that by taking that produced for minors under the age of 18 out, it says any book cannot be in that meet this definition cannot, or meet the Idaho Code definition cannot be in the juvenile or young adult. And then the second part change is to strike towards the very end, replace will with shall. So dissemination to minors policy, shall be removed from the juvenile and young adult section instead of will.
Stanley?
I think I wrote, I'm not sure if I wrote that in. That was the purple one? No, I thought, anyway, my thought was if books were purchased, were produced for minors and they're inappropriate, my concern was anyway, I didn't want to fill up the adult section of the library with books that were written for youngsters just to take them out of that area and make them, we'll say, unavailable. So
That's the next section.
okay, all right, that's all.
Okay, so we have consensus on shall?
Can you repeat it?
So it's just not clear to me. We have a selection policy and now you have a separate. So we don't have materials that violate these policies now. And so now you're saying that they will be removed. So that whole purple section doesn't make sense to me.
I think it's just an extra safeguard trustee class.
Yeah, it's just simply we just gave a definition of inappropriate for minors. That's what this definition is. We're talking about in this section, the rest of it is talking about inappropriate for minors. And the definition is in this section, materials produced or materials that would read that violate Idaho codes will be removed from the juvenile and young adult collection. So these are the materials that are inappropriate for minors, and they will not be put in juvenile and young adult section. They're materials inappropriate for minors. So anything that violates those Idaho codes, whether they're written for minors or adults, they cannot or shall not be put in the juvenile and young adult collections.
Trustee Henley?
Maybe in line with the library director's question, maybe this is applying to books that are already in the library. The other policy we just went through are acquisitions. These are books, I assume they're in a library, or let us say if a book did get purchased and came through the acquisitions process by mistake somehow, or we have a way of getting them out of the young adult area. So I'm assuming that this is for books that are already in a library, or we'll assume a book that works its way into the library that doesn't belong in there. Is that? I can't answer the question, but that's my understanding of what this is for.
Mm-hmm.
So again, our current selection policy reads materials for minors under the age of 18 that violate Idaho codes, and then 13, 14, 15 will be excluded from the juvenile and young adult collections. So if we've been compliant, then we don't have materials to remove. And so I think this is one of those things of clarity about separating the policies. I don't understand why this needs to be in the withdrawal policy when it's already been stated in the selection policy. And we've had a policy in place that we're compliant with.
Sure.
Trustee Fox?
Reason this section, materials appropriate for minors, is even there is because other places in the in this policy, we're talking, the bullets, the next section says if material is inappropriate for minors, if material is inappropriate, it wasn't defined any place. So this is defining what material is inappropriate for minors is. And yes, it's anything that violates the Idaho codes. And if we're in compliance, it's fine. It's just striking produced for minors under the age of 18, because if it was produced with 20-year-old characters as the main characters, maybe it doesn't meet that produced for minors. It's actually produced for adults. That book shall not be in the juvenile or adult collection. So it's this, what is the definition? And this is a broader definition. Any book that meets this, it doesn't just have to be produced for minors, which my understanding means the main characters are under 18.
Okay, so just starting hopefully with the easier one, do we have consensus on changing will to shall? Okay, so.
Fair point. I would recommend that the board use the language that was approved by legal before. And really the only difference is that they would read materials and then instead of produced, removing produced. The actual policy now reads materials for minors under the age of 18 that violate Idaho code will be excluded from the juvenile. So I think it should be will, and I think you should just be removing produced.
Trustee Claus?
No, I don't want any book if it was produced for adults to be in the minor. And by this policy originally saying produced for minors mean it's only the books that have main characters under age 18. Those are books produced for minors by definition by ALA or the library. Or how librarians define what section it goes to, my understanding is by the main characters in the book. If the main characters are above 18, it cannot go into the juvenile and young adult section.
Okay, so can we get consensus on the other part, removing produced for minors under the age of 18? Yes, we have consensus?
Okay. So the
Yes.
first sentence.
Yeah, the first sentence, so it would take out produced for minors under the age of 18. It would just read materials that violate blah, 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 blah.
Yes.
Okay.
I would add a point of clarity because there was an inaccurate statement made, if that's possible. Librarians don't select on the basis or categorize on the basis that you just characterized. And so I'll ask the assistant director to explain how librarians purchase. It's not just produced.
Okay, without objection?
Objection.
Okay, let me circle that and make sure that makes it the final. Okay, I'm considering, well, anyway, for your consideration, should we add notwithstanding Idaho Code 18:1517D before the word materials? So it would read notwithstanding Idaho Code 18:1517D, materials that violate Idaho codes 18:15 blah, 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 shall be removed from the juvenile and young adult collections. Right? Sorry, yes.
Oh, I thought somebody had her hand up. That's good. No, I have no problem with it. If it keeps.
Assuming you're addressing me, if that doesn't change the power of this thing here, I have no objection.
Okay.
You have that citation. I don't know that I have it. What is this 18:15:17D? What do you?
18:15:17D is the Idaho statute that provides an exemption for libraries and schools to disseminate materials harmful to minors. I'm not sure who's first.
I just didn't get the words.
Oh, notwithstanding Idaho Code 18:15:17D, and the D is in parentheses. You guys know who is first? Okay, first class.
I think we need to be careful on changing this. This is withdrawal. So we're not really changing, but by doing that, you're opening the court up a little bit more on that. Or opening it up to the court a little more. I think we were kind of advised, don't change anything on the withdrawal. Because once the book's in the library, I don't know whether changing the wording on that will make it riskier with the court, because the book's in the library. So.
Well, I'm sure legal counsel will let us know if that's inadvisable. Okay, Director?
I would like to ask staff a little bit about how this change might affect staff for implementing it. And in fairness, I think it's important that I state that the trustee job description says that as a member of the Board of Trustees, a trustee must work closely with the director and other administrators before that may be overridden again. So I would like to be able to ask the assistant director to discuss how these changes in that specific addition would affect staff.
Okay, without objection, Lindsay, go ahead and answer. Or
Sure.
What?
I object, but first I wanted to read what that section was. I've got it here. So we're clear what your wording is. Can I do that?
Okay.
So it's 15:1.
Slow us down.
Wasn't it 15:17
Yeah, 18, 15, 17, D.
B? So E says
D is in dog.
dog. Okay. This is defenses in prosecution for disseminating material harmful to minors. It's affirmative defense that, and D is the defendant was a bona fide school, college, university, museum, or public library, or was acting in his capacity as an employee of an organization or a retail outlet affiliated with and serving the educational purposes of the organization. So this is the do not prosecute any public library employee who hands out a book that violates this code.
Okay, thank you. So if there's no objection, we will move on to the next section, which is disposition of materials. I had a question on that first bullet point where it says dispose of. Does that just mean throw it away? Okay. Oh, yeah, yes. Trustee Hammond.
I would just go, if a book is, let's say, soaked in water or ripped in half or whatever the problem is, I'm not going to say how we should dispose of it, but I assume that books do get disposed of into the regular trash can or the dumpster on occasion. So I think that should be identified in there as one of the ways in which we dispose of materials. It's regardless of the content.
Okay. Director?
I have some proposed language in place of, I would recommend that we say something more along the lines of material which has been selected for removal from the collection during the weeding process will be relocated or disposed of using one of the following options. The first bullet point, dispose of materials, recycling whenever possible items that are damaged, in poor condition, obsolete, or otherwise unlikely to be sold. And the second bullet point, donate to a friend's library group, nonprofit organization, or transfer to another governmental entity. Those are all the options that we have. I would point out that Twice Told Tales is only one of our friends groups, and so at a minimum, I would recommend that we modify that statement. I do not understand some of the language about a separate section in the library, and so for disposition of materials, again, I would recommend that we include recycling when possible, and outline some reasons that we do delete, and I cannot be resold, and then donate to the Friends Group, a nonprofit, or transfer to another governmental agency. This is more reflective of what we're doing in practice as well.
I would think that dispose of would include recycling. So it's just, anyway, sorry, Trustee Hanley, did you?
I put that in there. I don't think anything in the last policy actually said how you dispose of anything. And the Twice Told Tales is one of the few, if not the only one that I was aware of. And if I understand correctly, if a book is given to Twice Told Tales and then it's resold, that money eventually comes back to the library, I think. And so that's certainly preferable. I don't know where else we donate books to. That was a big mystery. I couldn't find it anywhere. So where do we dispose? Not books that are destroyed. Where do all these books go when they're taken off the shelf? And that to me was a big open mystery area that I couldn't find anywhere.
Director, that's why I'm recommending why we're specifying that we are recycling. A lot of people like to know that we're doing that and that if we can resell them, we will. But there are some items that cannot be resold, like things that have water damage, that may have mold, that are, out of date, things like that. And so that's why, again, I'll repeat those bullet points. Dispose. And then I think of materials makes more sense. When I first read this, dispose of, it seemed kind of dangling to me about what are we disposing. So I would recommend dispose of materials, recycle whenever possible items that are damaged, in poor condition, obsolete, otherwise unlikely to be sold, and then donate to the friends groups. We have 2 friends groups. We also sometimes donate to nonprofit organizations if items may be better suited for Goodwill or Salvation Army or another organization. And then we can, occasionally we have materials that are very valuable, that are expensive, that we may have an updated set. So another organization will take an older set. And so we can do an intergovernmental transfer process. And so that's why I think spelling it out right in the policy for the public to find how are we disposing of them. And that information is valuable.
Okay, so excuse me, first one, I'll just take it a piece at a time. Should we add materials to that? So it says dispose of materials. Okay, that makes more sense to me as well. You guys want to add the stuff about recycling in there on the first bullet point? Trustee Boss?
I was just going to suggest to make it simpler than what the library director said, just after dispose of, just to add a couple more bullet points. Resell, recycle, be 2 more bullet points. And then in the bullet point for donate to Twice Told Tales, add afterwards and to friends group. Is that accurate?
Friends groups, what is that?
Groups, or is Twice Told Tale a friends group?
It's officially the Post Falls Friends Group. We have Friends of the Community Library Network as well.
Okay, so I like to keep things simple. I think dispose of covers all of the resale, recycle, throw it away, tape it to the ceiling, whatever they want to do with it. So are we just going to leave that first bullet point at dispose of materials? Okay, and I'm also concur with, consensus. So, okay, so it says dispose of materials. Next line, donate to Twice Told Tales, comma, friends groups, or transfer to another governmental entity. Is that okay? Do we have, yes, Trustee Hanley?
No, I think as a trustee, I'd like to know where do these books go? And so I'm not saying they're shady places where they're going, but I mean, I know what Twice Told Tales is. I don't know what these other places are. I mean, how many other places do we, because it's the taxpayer paid for the books on the shelf. At some point, they're determined that these are coming off the shelf. I don't know who's benefiting by it, where they go. So I'm not thinking there's something illegal going on or shady or anything like that, but besides Twice Told Tales, should we specify where these other places are? I don't know what these other places are.
Like I said, my recommendation is that they be nonprofit organizations or other governmental agencies, which does give the board some more assurance. They are a valuable asset. There is value. We all are also talking about gifts, and so donations that benefit the library. And so that is why I proposed a more clear language of what we're actually doing.
consensus on add-ons there? That bullet point? Trustee Glass?
I think we should say a little bit more than just dispose of materials. I still prefer adding a couple more bullet points, resell, recycle.
Trustee Hanley?
Yeah, I thought we agreed, which is fine. I don't care if we go back, but dispose of materials, I really don't care how to dispose of the things that are destroyed or damaged, but are we, I guess we're always, if we're on the same place here, donate to Twice Tall Tales. That's one place where we donate to. And obviously, it sounds like we don't want to limit ourselves to saying that's the only place. So how do we add more bullets, or do we expand on that particular bullet? Right here, we're limiting ourselves already. If we don't put anything else in here, the only place the books can go is either in a garbage can or recycling, or they can go to Twice Told Tales, or they can be moved around within the library. So there's not a lot of flexibility in there. And obviously, they are going to places other than Twice Told Tales. So are we going to add specific organizations, or are we going to add generic governmental agencies and nonprofits? I'm not really clear on that.
Okay, so a piece at a time, should we add nonprofit friends groups to donate to Twice Told Tales line? Trustee Glass?
Well, I guess I'm not real clear what the friends groups you're talking about are, but don't they have book sales and sell the books? Aren't they covered by resale? I mean, they don't have bookstores. I mean, they don't have their own libraries, do they?
Director?
I'm a little confused in the question, but what's currently being discussed is dispose of materials and then donate to one of our friends groups. So the process is actually that staff review gifts and staff delete books from the library's collection. And so that is what our two friends groups are essentially doing, is they're reselling books that have been discarded by the library and donations that we've received from the public. And so the way it is written right now, we're putting them in the garbage, and then we're only giving them to one post-fall specific library. So I would absolutely recommend strongly that we at least change it from naming a specific, and it's the store name, and it's not the name of the organization either. It's the Post Falls Friends. It's the Community Library Network Friends. I think the reason why we prioritize them is that the library can receive some benefit. So in your annual budget, you will see under grants, you will see each organization listed and the amount of money that they donate. They essentially don't have any money in deposit or in stores. They earn the money and then they give us the money. And so that is why we prioritize those two groups. Occasionally, their capacity will be overmuch, and we may donate to Goodwill, or if they have a sale and it doesn't sell, they pull it and they donate it to somebody else. And so that's why we need the flexibility of what I'm recommending.
Okay, so you want to take Twice Told Tales out and replace it with nonprofit friends groups or friends?
Friends library groups.
Capital F. Okay, Trustee Glass.
So where we were before talking about resale, how about to donate it to nonprofits for resale? Don't even get into who, but there's going to Goodwill, go into whatever. If you're just donating it to nonprofits for resale.
Well, if it's to a friends group, then we get the money from that. That would be preferable. Although I still think that dispose of materials could be like a catch-all for anything else that they wanted to do. Okay, so we do or do not have Trustee Hammond?
So the books that we donate to friends library groups, or friends of the library groups, do all those proceeds come back to the library, or does it benefit other organizations at the taxpayer's expense? I don't have enough understanding of that.
Director?
You know, they are separate entities than the library. So I may not be able to I may not be the best person to answer that question, to be honest. But what I would say largely is after attending meetings, I would say that yes, their goal is to 99% of the funds come back to the library. They offer grant requests all throughout the year. So I would not say, I would not say 100%, but I don't know what that very small margin would be. They're all volunteers. There's no paid staff. There's very little administration, everything. I mean, they may pay for coffee in their meeting is what I'm saying.
Okay, so it sounds like we maybe have consensus on just saying nonprofit groups.
Does that include? Would that then include the Friends of the Library? Groups?
Yeah, there's nonprofit, right?
And then I heard the word nonprofit as well.
I think it's a better service to our community who's reading this to have the information that we have Friends of the Library groups. And I think it's respectful for us to name them by friends.
First class?
But then if we name them, then we have to name other groups, or do we say, or other non-profits?
They're not, well,
You give it to Goodwill, I don't want to list everybody.
that could be under dispose of materials. Anyways, this, could be, well, nonprofit friends groups.
Donate to Friends or CLN Friends groups and other nonprofits.
Friends groups.
I'd like to recognize staff.
Business manager.
May I reread what Director Eccles had suggested for that section that may clarify it?
Yeah, without objection.
No objection.
Okay.
Donate to friends, library groups, other nonprofit organizations, or governmental agencies.
That sound good? Okay, so we have consensus on that. Thank you for direction there.
Can we read it back?
Would you please?
Donate to friends, library groups, other nonprofit organizations, or governmental agencies.
Do we have anything else with that section or move on? Okay, so ifs, not applicable to a waiting policy. Director?
I'm sorry, did we go over the last two bullet points? We were kind of going over the front and then the two, and then we didn't talk about the last two.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought that I asked if was there anything else? Did I not? Okay.
That's okay. So I do not understand the last bullet point. If the person that wrote this could explain it. It reads, if material is inappropriate for minors but not produced for adults, move to a library location other than the regular adult collection area, not accessible to minors and only made available to adults. What do they mean by this, or what are they envisioning? I'm not familiar with anything like this in a public library.
Trustee Hanley?
When I wrote this particular line item or bullet, what was on my mind was I did not want to fill the adult section of the library with books that are targeted for minors. So if we find a book that's targeted for minors that's inappropriate, I don't think we should move it to the adult section and draw the minors over to the adult section And since it's so restricted to take a book out of the library for legal purposes, then I think that the material should be moved somewhere out of not accessible to minors, nor made available, and they only made available to adults. And I think I had in one of my versions here also not displayed. And he goes, I don't want to see a display of books behind the librarian at the counter with all the banned books up there. And hey, you know, they just, to me, are advertising. I just think that if the book is written for minors and it's in the library and it doesn't belong in there, it's too difficult to get it out of the library, but it doesn't belong in the adult section if it's written for minors. So that's what my thought was when I wrote that.
Okay, I'm not sure that legally we can do that, but we could do it and see what our attorney has to say about it.
I would just characterize, I think the board's lack of experience with a lot of our libraries is kind of influencing some of this vision as well. We have bookmobiles, we have little tiny libraries. I don't know that this is going to be possible for every location in CLN to create a separate location. And so.
I don't know, Trustee Fox?
So when we were at Pinehurst, this is one of them that I think you're probably talking to. I asked the main librarian there, how do you keep adults from going over one aisle over into the adult section? And her answer was, well, that's up to the parents. I don't want the materials inappropriate for minors that were written for minors. I don't want it to be put over in the adult section one aisle over and be bait to bring the young adults over to it. It shouldn't be there. If it's not an adult book, it shouldn't be there. Chances are the minors aren't really interested in adult romances or other things. They're not going to the adult section for the most part, but they might go there if there's a minor book that's inappropriate. So I said this actually in my campaign. We need to put it behind the counter in a cabinet, someplace where it's inaccessible to minors, but it is an adult book, so it shouldn't be in the adult section.
Trustee Hanley?
I worded it rather carefully at the time. I thought if the books are written for children, for minors, and they're inappropriate and they're determined as such, we don't need to have a special secret section in all the libraries. So I moved that so that I don't care if they all go in the basement, if there was a basement here in Post Falls or over in Hayden or anywhere else. Obviously, you're not going to have a hiding place on the bus, nor in some of the smaller libraries. So I left it up to the library staff to determine where that is. So I said library location. That's pretty generic, at least a lot of latitude and ability for the library staff to determine what's appropriate there.
Okay.
I would just characterize this as not the least restrictive measure that could be done to implement this. We do have our minor library cards, and making the material an adult status is what we're currently doing essentially. And it gives staff and the reconsideration process that choice and where to locate it that's most appropriate for our communities. A minor card that has the item as an adult tag essentially would prevent it from being checked out. And so just as I agree that I don't think this is going to be approved by legal. But again, you have a policy that's already essentially doing this.
Trustee Fox?
Well, not really. In Pinehurst, any minor can walk over to the adult section, one aisle over, and they can go sit there and look at these books that have been moved there. The library staff down there needs to find some place other than the adult section to put them. They're not adult books. Adults aren't going to be looking for them. They're taking up shelf space in the adult section. They need to go someplace, and I agree with the other trustee that let the librarians decide. I was just giving some examples of my campaign, but it needs to not go in the adult section if it's not written for adults.
Okay, so
Adults could check it out. Parents could check it out. I don't want them to do it, but they could check it out for their kids.
okay, it sounds like we do not have a consensus to change this, so we'll leave that as is. move on to the next section, or no, you still had something else?
Maybe one add-on. I think that's where I had it once. It says on the last sentence of it, the regular adult collection area. Okay, not accessible. I think I wrote once, nor displayed to minors and only made available to adults. There's no reason to entice them with the candy they can't have. So I think it should say not displayed.
I like that. Richard?
I would just, again, characterize that I don't think the trustees understand what is produced for adults or produced for children and how that is implemented by librarians.
So, nor displayed. Thumbs up or thumbs
And then
down?
trustees do have a display policy that may be in conflict with.
Deal with it later.
And, okay, so, yeah, I'm in agreement, so that's at least 2. All right, so gift section, take it out.
Yes.
Okay. Reconsideration of material. At first change there, crossing out given in the second line and accepting submitted in the third line.
If I could be acknowledged for just a moment, there was a question, sorry.
No objections.
With no objections.
No.
Sorry.
Just for clarity for the minutes, where does the not displayed, which bullet point and where in that bullet point?
Okay, it is in disposition of materials, the red section, in the last line, in between minors and the word and I believe it was nor displayed.
Oh, it was before. Yeah,
Which bullet point?
it's between accessible and to, so you say.
Oh, right.
Displayed. Yeah,
Right.
not accessible nor displayed to minors.
Okay, thank you.
Just for clarification, you may want to add that to the line above it, because then if materials are inappropriate but produced, we're moving it to the adult section and then we can display it there. Is that fine? You don't have a, okay.
It's just an adult look.
So move it where? Or just leave it. All right, so we took out the gift section onto reconsideration of material. Okay, so are we in agreement on taking out the word given and replacing it with the word submitted?
Yeah.
Okay, consensus on that. Change is the cross out of as a guide and evaluating the work as a whole. Do we have consensus on that? Yes? No?
Which, you know,
It's in yellow. And we'll strike through as a guide and evaluating the work as a whole, so take that out. Oh, and the word a as well. All right, the word the decision will be submitted. Agreement on that. Okay. That's next one within 30 days. Director?
It's definitely our goal. However, it is not considering how long the text may be. I think this is assuming that all of our books are picture books or board books. Sometimes they're complete novels. And so we also have to obtain enough materials for everybody on the committee or the staff reviewing. And so sometimes we have one material, one copy, and it has to be shared among staff. So I would not put in such a firm deadline. I think that would be a great goal.
It would be what?
A good goal.
Oh, cool.
I don't object that we should be timely in our response, but I don't know that 30 days.
60 days.
Or we could put if at all possible, or if possible.
I also don't mind adding like a communication. So like when I get public records requests now, I respond that I've received it and I'll keep them posted, right? So I think, sufficient or ongoing communication about where the process is would be fine too. But I would be reluctant to, based on those factors of sharing a book and how long the book is, that we can hit that every time.
Okay, so do we have consensus on, within 30 days if possible? One is, crossed out on the next line, Board of Trustees. I really like okay, so, I like the idea of the community review panel, but I was thinking that then they're not accountable to the taxpayers. And that opens up, like, you'd have to figure out how the community review panel is going to be done, and that would probably take a long time. So what do you guys think?
It doesn't exist now.
No, it does not exist. Director?
If I can, just as an overall understanding in the reading, it was not clear to me what their role was or what their authority was, and how that plays between the staff consideration group and then the board. It wasn't spelled out enough that is, I mean, it would make sense to me if you're trying to say that you want a community review panel that makes a recommendation to the board. But language about making sure the staff did the job or any of that kind of stuff, that again, very kind of gray. I would recommend more clarity about what is the goal of having that committee? How many people do you see on it? How much support and training will they have? Will they be from community sources like literature teachers and school teachers? What's going to be the makeup of that committee? There's a lot of work to go into it. I think it could be great, but the really basic question I had is, what was their purpose? What was their role? What was their authority?
Trustee Boss?
So I didn't really give this much consideration, but I think if you're going to have a review panel, I think we almost have to have a policy on what it is. And so I'm reluctant to add that in now. We just leave it the way it was, decision to the Board of Trustees. We can follow up with a policy saying the Board of Trustees, when they get this, refers it to this panel and how the panel is done. But I think by leaving it Board of Trustees, it leaves us the option on how we want to deal with it.
Okay. Trustee Henley?
I had put that in there to reduce the workload on the Board of Trustees. I do see that it could be a not so much contentious, but time-consuming effort to define it better. And so I'm okay with striking that and leaving it with the board, just because I think that'll unduly delay this entire policy.
Well, then we have consensus on keeping just the Board of Trustees and not putting any language in there. Director?
I would just clarify that I think if the board is wanting a panel, that this policy is the right place for them to spell out the details that we were just talking about. So instead of a separate policy, I would just amend this portion and spell out those details. I think it's important that we not create 100 separate policies that are related to each other.
Okay, yeah, we could do that at a different time though. All right, so the next contemplated change is in red lettering, but
Is that,
So it's clear. So we just left in there Board of Trustees, and we're striking Board Appointed Community Review Panel.
right.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so do we have consensus on keeping words except as necessary for examination during this process? Okay, 3 yeses. Okay, we're keeping that. Okay, and then in the last, second to last line, an item will be evaluated for reconsideration only once in a 3-year period, unless, and I would like to insert the words, the board decides sufficient new compelling evidence is introduced, because otherwise it doesn't say who decides that. could be the mailman.
So determines, or determines.
Determines, yeah, that's a better word. Okay, trustee Hanley. Okay. Does that sound like a good idea to you guys? Director?
I would just ask legal about that. It seems a little too close that the board is determining what is being reevaluated when they have a role in a sort of pseudo hearing process. I think it would be stronger that it was either a community member or a staff person would maybe put it on. I would not put it on the board that is the authority to make the final decision, if that makes sense. It should not come from you that you want to. Do you know what I'm saying?
Okay, well, isn't that like how the Supreme Court usually decide? They decide whether they're going to take a case or not, and then they. Well, I know.
Well, I mean, then why even have why not just say an item will be evaluated? I mean, there was a reason why that was added, and most of this board wasn't on there at the time. And so I would just pause also and recommend that you check with other staff and board members that have more experience about why they added that.
Trustee Fox?
I don't think by adding the words "the board determines" in there, that we're the one doing the investigation. I think a case could be submitted and we'll make the decision based on the case. I would look for the board to establish a community review panel that does this also. So leaving it with the board gives us the flexibility to hand it off some other way.
Okay, so we can have the legal review. Anyway, so do we have consensus on the board determines?
Yes.
Yes, okay. All right, and we are done. We've got policy as well. Trustee Fox?
There's a chance at the end of this process to
Oh, right.
something, and I left out under bottom
Which page?
of page 2, withdrawal of materials. The first bullet, damaged or poor condition. I would like to add, unless material is out of print and considered a classic. Or it's again considered a classic. Unless material is out of print and considered a classic. This is a really ripe phrase that allows all of our classics to be tossed and thrown in the garbage because the binding is getting worn or because it's not used much or whatever. But I think we need to give extra consideration somehow to classic books that are out of print. So I'm not saying we keep it. I'm just saying we'll stop a little bit. Don't just throw it away because it's in poor condition.
Director?
So I would just point out that crew method that's in reference above, the continuous review and evaluation for waiting process, is I think 175 pages. So it's very clear for staff in what we should be doing. And these are just bullet points of a 175 page document. So I would also say that most classics are reprinted. So it's very rare as a public library serving a community of 100,000 that we would be the only person that would have a book. If we don't have it in our collection, we can also borrow through interlibrary loan throughout the state, throughout the country. So people still have access to materials. We would not have, let's say, moldy books in our library because book mold can spread to other books and it can cause a deterioration of your entire collection. So the role and the professionalism in that part really does come down to the trained library staff making those determinations and using that, again, very, very specific book. Since we're talking about the whole, again, I would also recommend, I made some recommendations that e-materials be included in this. And so that was not considered the last time. But I still strongly recommend that we articulate more of that 175 page book in these very limited material points. I'd like to make it very clear that we are not basing it on content.
Okay, so to try to move this quickly, do we have interest in changing it for e-materials? As the end?
Is that just a given? I mean, it's material. I don't know.
Yeah, it already says that they use the crew method up there. So, I'm not interested, so we do not have consensus on adding that. Hold on, might consider, damage and poor condition, maybe semicolon, material that is out of print and considered a classic will receive special consideration for retainment.
My question was, does the crew method, I haven't read the 175 pages, but does it make special consideration for old classic books? Because yes, we can get it down at, Pinehurst, or not Pinehurst, St. Mary's, or if it's Priest Lake or someplace maybe has these books, they've kept them, but I don't want to lose more of them and toss them just because they're damaged in poor condition. So does the crew make consideration for a book like that?
There are, materials that are out of print, for example, that get damaged, we can rebind them. Rebinding is expensive, and the end result is somewhat ugly, if I were honest. They don't have the same cover art, so it's never going to look as attractive. So generally, the rule of thumb, especially local information, local history, things like that, if we had the last copy and it was damaged, we would rebind it. That's the professional library recommendation. So we do make those determinations. For classics, we would look to see if it was reprinted. Most of the time, those classics that you're probably referring to, although I don't know specifically what you consider a classic, but most of the materials are still in print that we can purchase. It is a consideration in whether we pull it, but so is use. If it has not gone out in 10 years, we may pull it based on its lack of use, and we would consider that obsolete. So confirmed by the fact that it's no longer being printed, there's less interest now.
Okay, so since we postponed the material selection policy until after the materials withdrawal, you could withdraw both of your motions, and by consensus, we could send both of them to Boyle's Law for legal review. Do you want to withdraw those? Or do you want to deal with them one at a time?
Should vote one after the other. I thought we did vote.
What do we do this for?
Did we? Oh,
Did we finish that bullet? We didn't look at it.
What was your wording on that vote?
Like I said, it's already in the 175-page crew method. I don't know why the board would be as focused on that, but it's possible to add it. I would just also add that I'm concerned that we now have downloadable and online digital content in our selection, and we have not addressed that in deselection. So if we own it, we're keeping it forever is how I interpret that.
we will have one more go around. Okay, so what it was is damage in poor condition, semicolon, material that is out of print and considered a classic will receive special consideration for retainment. Which doesn't mean that they have to keep them. It just means that they should give it extra consideration.
I would just say what a classic is not defined to me, and I think we might all have different ideas of what a classic is. I generally define classics as what is on a list that's like a college-bound reading list, is what I would consider a classic. Is that along the same lines, or?
Yeah, that would be part of it. I would think, books that have withstood the test of time because they're so good and they contribute to humanity. So that's a little bit long.
Yeah, that's kind of broad. So, I think out of print is really clear, but the definition there of classics is a little bit unclear to me.
Okay. Okay. So.
Just go where
Where is. Okay. So sorry, there's so many moving parts in my head. So we did already vote on the material selection policy. Okay, then we will move on to Okay, we need to extend the meeting, say, or I would entertain a motion to extend the meeting to 4:15. I could just make,
I moved that we extend the meeting to 4:15.
okay, it has been moved to extend the meeting to 4:15. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Okay, the ayes have it. The motion is carried and we extend the meeting to 4:15. All right, so the motion for the materials withdrawal and reconsideration is, I move that we approve sequentially the first draft of the materials withdrawal and reconsideration policy and send to legal counsel for review.
Is it as amended tonight?
Oh, so we would need to put that in there.
The
Sorry.
completion of the motion that was tabled for the same month. We tabled the last meeting, and we just resumed here.
Right, so it doesn't say as amended. So I move to amend the motion, add the words as amended after the word, or after the class draft.
Today.
Well, that's how it's been amended today. All right, so all those in favor of the motion to amend, adding the words as amended in between draft and of, and so that it would read, I move that we approve sequentially the class draft as amended of the materials withdrawal and reconsideration policy and send legal counsel for review. All those in favor of the amendment?
Right.
Aye, okay, now we move.
Sure.
Yes,
The sequentially implies you're amending it as you go. That's part of the process in chapter 26 is you go through and amend it. So you don't have to say it. It's just
okay,
part
yes,
of
I
it.
need to go
Yeah.
back.
That's
Anyway, all right, so motion, excuse me. Motion on the floor is that we approve sequentially the class draft as amended of the materials withdrawal and reconsideration policy and send to legal counsel for review. All those in favor? Aye, okay, the ayes have it and the motion is approved and we will send the materials withdrawal and reconsideration policy to our legal counsel for review. Discussion of future agenda requests. Director, you have something to say?
I was just going to mention, the board received some correspondence about a public hearing. If I could mention that meeting request.
Well, okay, I had noticed that it was put on this agenda for one of our upcoming meetings. But I don't believe that we had ever had consensus on adding that to the December.
So yes, that's what I was going to explain to the board. So at our last meeting, it was unknown to me and since been told that since we did not have that in our August public hearing, in order for us to reserve foregone tax, we would actually need to have a public hearing with that listed as a topic. And so for the board to be able to discuss it and consider it, they would need to have a public hearing. And so my recommendation is that we just have it at the end of a meeting or at the beginning of a meeting to sort of save time on behalf of the board.
Trustee Hannah?
If the meeting or foregone taxes, if it means that we're still gonna earmark and hold aside tax increases that we did not take this year, and I don't want to have a meeting about it because I don't wish to do it. We made a decision of what our budget's going to be, and I'm okay with what the budget is. And so, if that's what we mean by foregone tax hearing and having a special meeting or adding that to another meeting, I don't see a need for it. I stand by the budget we worked on this year for 2024.
Okay, Trustee Ploss?
Well, I'm also a little confused. Would this be basically an agenda item at the end of the meeting where we, as a board, discuss if we're going to have the hearing? Or you're saying this is the hearing and we're already letting the public know before December 21st that we're having a hearing about the foregone taxes?
So because of the statutory requirement that it be done before the end of December, we have a little bit of a time crunch. And so I had brought this to the board and there wasn't a discussion or anything. So this was planned to be on the December agenda. The hearing portion is new. And that was the part that I didn't understand. So it is a public open hearing, so the board would need to take consideration for that. I had recommended that we put this as an agenda topic so that it could be discussed and an action or decision could be made that we're not going to take foregone taxes, so we don't need to. But at this point, all we have is just the planning and the meetings. So I'm not sure that we have a lot of latitude. I think it'll take probably 10 or 15 minutes. I hear what the board's saying, that they're not interested, or several members have said they're not interested. That's fine, but we're now in this process because of the time frame. But in order to actually discuss it on an agenda, we have to have a hearing because we won't meet a statutory deadline if we do decide, unless we tell the public. And next year, we can streamline this by either posting it in August or not posting it in August. But this year, it was a little confusing. And it was new to me that we needed to have a hearing since we didn't before. Trustee Claus?
So you're saying the process, are we already in the process? Has this been announced, publicized that we're going to have a hearing? What is the process that we're already in? I'm not sure. Because I think I would like to vote no that we don't have this. The other trustee said that. I don't.
Yeah, if we don't have consensus, then we don't have consensus and it doesn't go on there.
What's the
So it
process that we're in?
Well, it looks like it's on the calendar of events, but Trustee Young?
If we meet by statute, based on statute, we need to have our public hearing before the end of the year. I would assume that public hearing is only if we wish to entertain foregone taxes.
Right.
Which I don't feel inclined to do.
Okay, so it doesn't sound like anyone's interested in entertaining that option. Business manager
With no,
with no objection.
no.
If I could just clarify, it is not collecting taxes. It is reserving the right to do it down the road. Not saying that you ever have to do it down the road, but it is, if you want to, then you would need to reserve them, but the taxes are not collected from the taxpayers. It's just this amount that says you could take this later. But in order to do that, we do have to have a public hearing stating your desire to reserve them for future use.
Thank you for explaining that, because I had that in my head, but I neglected to explain that to them. So still the same, or?
I just have one last question, if it's okay with the chair, to the business manager, is, so with if we went ahead, which I don't plan to, with the foregone tax, is it just available to us if we wish to exercise it throughout the fiscal year? And then that's the end of it. We can take the money or not take the money, but is it for the duration of the fiscal year?
If there is no objection? Wait, is that an objection?
So,
Please.
you can only use foregone taxes at a future budget. So, if you reserve your current year's foregone taxes that are created for FY24, they're just reserved. They've never been collected. You can't use them in FY24. You would only be able to use them under the statutory regulations that they have provided, of adding a certain percentage to operational funds in a future budget year, or adding a larger percentage available for a capital project in future budget years, but not the current year. The funds won't be collected ever unless you decide you want to use them.
Thank you. Trustee Claus?
So isn't it true that we can do this for up to 5 years? It's not indefinite that we could go on 25, 30 years from now and go collect it.
There's a limit.
For no objection, go ahead.
My understanding from the State Tax Commission is as long as there is foregone available, then entities have the right to request using it at future dates until the legislature decides something different. And there has been, quite a bit of change to foregone in the last 5 years. So it's entirely possible the legislature would just be done with foregone and that would never occur again.
Okay, so do we have anyone interested in a budget hearing or is it still the same?
No.
Okay, so consensus that we are not interested. Right, I had a future agenda item. I hate to do this because I know that we're always inundated, but it seems kind of time important. Revised Personnel Policy Manual 5.3.6 holidays. Like I said, it's not the most important thing in the world, but if we're going to revise it, it seems like we should do it in December so that staff can make vacation plans for the 2024 holidays. Trustee Henley?
Is this to review the entire policy, the whole manual, because it's quite a few pages long, and I may have a few changes I'd like to make in it, but we got one meeting, I think, left of this year. Is that for one change? Is that what you're saying?
My suggestion was just 5.3.6 holidays, which is just a one-page document, pretty sparse at that. So I'm hoping we can get through it pretty quick. First class?
What's the incentive? Why do we need to review this? Is there something in it that should be changed or reconsidered?
Yeah, and I don't think we can discuss what I'd like to change, but I think if we're going to do it, it would be best to give the staff as much notice as possible because they're going to be making their plans and we want to make sure that they know, what the holidays are when the library will be closed. Okay, so it sounds like we have consensus to add that to the next agenda, December 21st. Anything else? Trustee Claus?
So I guess I'm not real clear, but I don't know whether we're continuing with the library director performance evaluation, whether that goes on, or are we going to take that offline and start having committee meetings? Because I think we were getting close enough we could just finish it. No, not today. I'm thinking another meeting. But if we're going to take it offline and go have another meeting, then I guess it shouldn't be on the agenda until we have that meeting.
Okay, so do you guys want to schedule a committee meeting? Or do you want to just go to have it done?
I just assume keep going here. So add it.
Okay, so in a regular agenda.
I don't know. Do you have some specific reaction?
I've got someone trying to understand. Are you asking if we're going to have another committee meeting before the next regular meeting and then continue the conversation? Or are you saying we'll continue working on the director eval policy in this meeting? I'm not sure.
I'm saying we should decide that if we're going to just keep doing it in this meeting, that policy should be an agenda item.
In this meeting or the December 21st?
The next meeting.
Okay.
But I don't see a lot of advantage in going back and doing a committee meeting other than it saves time here, but I think people are going to be involved anyway, it sounds like.
Okay. Director?
I'm just gonna, just as a matter of form, again, communicate that usually you have one policy per meeting. And so we're gonna have, just to make sure I understand, we're gonna have the director evaluation, the selection, the withdrawal, and now the personnel policy. So that's where we keep adding. That's a pretty tight meeting. So there's going to be less time per section, per topic. I would prefer, just for efficiency, that the board focus on one, get it done, focus on the next, get it done. And so the library director evaluation policy, is that going to go to legal for review?
No.
So generally, yeah, that's what I'm
We
asking.
haven't gotten through it yet.
So I'm just saying, like, we already have material selection. That's probably the closest to be done. I would just prioritize the time and try to minimize having so much competing for the time. So I recommend the board really looking at the time saving of committee meetings.
Okay.
Trustee Claus?
So I'm willing to do that. Don't put personnel or library library director evaluation policy on the agenda for December 21st. And let's set up a committee meeting offline. And you're going to come anyway, but we'll have another meeting just to go over it. But I don't want to wait until January to make any progress with it. So whenever we can set up a committee meeting and do an open meeting law and all that.
Okay, so I think that you guys could do that.
So I was just gonna say, what I was envisioning is us maybe having a meeting in a week and a half, and then making some changes, and then we can still have it on the agenda. It's just that we won't need as much time to discuss it because several people will have already gotten some of those hurdles. So it just saves time in the meeting. So I'll reach out for a meeting for us and notify everybody.
Sounds good. Trustee Hanley.
So I don't see the material selection policy or the withdrawal. Should they be at the next regular meeting, assuming
Yeah.
council had time to review it?
Yes.
Yes.
Then I own it.
So I can get that typed up before tomorrow morning and sent to you. And then you can send it on to legal after you've approved it.
So I'm just assuming that the board is requesting an oral report at the next board meeting, unless you've told me otherwise, to prepare council for that. Okay, perfect.
That seems to be.
For legal review.
For the legal review to be.
It seems to be how he likes to operate. He just, fellows.
Okay,
Reporting to the board. In turn.
yes.
Yeah.
Right, so are we done with discussion of future agenda requests? And trustee class?
Doesn't have to be till January, but I still am looking to change our policy review process in the bylaws to get a big screen, to use chapter 26, to call it out. So this is what we do, and to use committees. Yes, we should have. I went to the NIC policy committee and they had an open meeting. It was a smaller group. So we should be doing that too.
All right, set special and regular meeting dates, none? Other than you guys figure out the committee meeting?
Yeah.
All right, then I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Katie's not here.
I move to maybe adjourn.
It has been moved to be adjourned. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Okay, the ayes have it. We are now adjourned. Thank you. Yeah.